My little itty-bitty bruiser buddies.
United States heavyweight champion from Brazil.
The world's heavyweight champion from the AWA, Nick Bockwinkel.
The Midwest supporting, bruiser loving, positivity spreading, world's most dangerous podcast. Join former pro wrestler and promoter Dave Dynasty as he supports and promotes Midwest pro wrestling. Keep on growing with the Midwest Express. This is the Dave Dynasty Show.
And welcome to the Dave Dynasty Show. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining us for another episode. And once again, I'm joined by a special co-host, a guest co-host. Joining me this episode is Andy from the Road Home from Wrestling podcast. Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Dave. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing very, very well. You've been a guy, you and I have, I don't know, we've communicated, interacted, crossed a lot of paths online, but this is really the first time we're speaking, so this is kind of unique.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I mean, we're both kind of doing the same thing in different ways.
Yep.
And one of the things that I am really interested to hear about and kind of talk to you about is that your connection with the past. You know, what we do on the Road Home from Wrestling podcast is so current that a lot of times we have, you know, reviews of shows that have just happened. We have those up just hours after the show. What you do is you kind of have more of a connection to the past, right?
I do. That's because I'm old. Yeah, so, you know, I am the past. So okay, so how old are you, Andy?
I'm 38 years old, my friend.
Okay, so I'm not that much older than you. So sorry if I call myself old. I'm 43, so we're not that far off. So, but
it's all good.
Yeah. So, but I feel old. I feel older every day. But so tell me, Andy. So how did you get the wrestling bug? Tell me about your past with wrestling and when it bit you.
Well, you know, my story is kind of typical to folks that have gotten into pro wrestling recently. And by recently, I mean several years ago. But when I was a kid, I liked Hulk Hogan and Macho Man and all that stuff. I really liked Jake the Snake and, you know, Roddy Piper. But then I kind of didn't watch wrestling when I was, you know, once I got past the age of like 8 or 9, got back into it during the Nitro years and really didn't quite get the bug, if you will, you know, that bite me to become kind of like a smart fan until, you know, about 2012. You know, when Punk was leaving and, you know, the Daniel Bryan storyline was starting to build and all that kind of stuff, it really made me wonder what's going on with all this. I want to watch wrestling, and I'm one of these people that I can't just watch something. I have to dig into it. I got to figure it out, you know, and that's kind of what made me want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So where'd you grow up? What area did you grow up in?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, Cincinnati. So you probably wouldn't be old enough. The Sheik would have already been off TV. You would have been deep in NWA country and just getting your normal programming in Cincinnati when you were a kid, right? So,
yeah, we did have. I believe NWA was on ESPN2, I think, when I was younger. But I honestly, I didn't really watch that. You know, I wasn't really interested in it as an art form until I was much older because like much other people, you know, many other people, I just kind of dismissed it as something that wasn't necessarily art. I didn't understand what it was until later on.
Yeah. Well, see, I got hooked by my grandmother, and I don't even know how. I bet I had to be 5-6 years old, and she would watch it religiously, and she hook, line, and sinker. She was sold. Everything, you know, she'd scream at the hills, cheer for the good guys. She was so passionate. And I'd watch it with her, and she lived in a little town called Edinburgh, Indiana. This is just a little bit. I don't even think they have a mayor. It's just a small town. And one time, I don't really remember the show specifics, but probably this had to have been my first show, I would guess, that I ever went to, was there at the Edinburgh High School, and it was a bruiser show. And he would have been older. It would have been in the 80s. It would have been on the tail end of his run and stuff. But everything about it was so fascinating. The live experience was. I loved it on TV, but then getting to see it live was just this whole other experience. And I was already hooked, but when I saw that live show, and especially, I mean, even Bruiser at that age was just such a character. It just hooked me, and I wanted to know. I was like, when when I get something, I get consumed by it. And this has been a thing that I've been consumed by for 30-something years now. And I want to watch everything, and I want to read everything, and I want to explore everything. And, I spend more hours than I care to admit, perusing newspapers.com, looking at old articles and ads and stuff. So that's kind of my story. I've told the story before on the air, but that's, kind of what I did. So, yeah, it is kind of different. You're kind of hooked more by the more modern product. I was kind of hooked by the older product. And I probably live about an hour and a half from you, from where you're from, Cincy, about an hour from Louisville. I'm about an hour south of Indianapolis. So I had this unique thing when I was a kid that we could, not always the greatest, but we could pick up Memphis out of Louisville, and I could pick up the Bruiser show that was still on out of Indianapolis, and then all the other stuff that was on all, the WWE shows, the NWA shows. And then, of course, into the 80s, there was, AWA, World Class, all that was on cable. So, and I even remember, getting the old TBS, the Georgia show, watching some of that in the 80s. So I had that unique advantage of where I lived, being able to get all this different stuff, even pre-cable, because we didn't get cable for a while. But even with an antenna, we were picking stuff up out of Louisville and stuff like that. So it was very, very cool, very unique. I think I'm kind of fortunate in that. So
we all are. I mean, that was one of the things that I loved about the first time I went to see a show. That was a life-changing experience for me, because seeing it live is completely different than television.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole other thing, and it really immerses you in the thing, especially when you get to see folks that are famous up close, and they have this aura that you see through the television, but you can't really experience that, unless you see it in person. And once I saw that, I started to dip my toe into a little bit of independent wrestling in here in our area, and then I realized the rich history, and not only that, the just sheer amount of pro wrestling that goes on in the Midwest area. It's insane. Absolutely insane.
It is, and it's always so overlooked, because everybody talks about Memphis, and everybody talks about Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas, and the Midwest does get overlooked so much. And Indianapolis and Detroit, and even Cincinnati. I mean, to me, one of the greatest professional wrestlers that I've ever seen, and he's still, and then he got into broadcasting, and he's trained, is Les Thatcher. So right there out of Cincinnati. And so many people don't even know who Les is, who he is. But he is, such a talented guy. And, right down the road from me, 20 minutes south of me, Seymour, Indiana, where Rip Rogers is from. And Rip Rogers is just amazing. He's an incredible talent. He's done so much, worked everywhere, was a star in Stampede and everything else. But he's just, I have, new friends that would play basketball with Rip Rogers down at Seymour when after he worked out. And it's so different to see these guys away off the TV in a show, or even in, a real life situation. And not saying Rip ever, I doubt he ever would broke his character. But I don't think there's a lot of difference between Rip and his character. I think it's all one and the same, but but like you said, we focus a lot on the history, a lot here. But I think, in my opinion, the cool thing is there's so many parallels, though, between the past and the present. And in the past, they had, the territorial system, and there was so much stuff on TV, and everybody had local TV, and then there was the national cable shows starting to break out, and there were shows just everywhere. And, of course, the attendance at that, was at a different level and a different scale. But even now, there's not a week goes by that all over the country, wherever you are, there's always shows within a drive of you. And overall, for the most part, especially when you look at the quality shows, they're drawing very well. And with social media and streaming services and everything else, there's this whole plethora of stuff that we can all watch from all over the world again. And to me, there's a lot of parallels between the two. I think we're back in this upswing, and this things are booming again. And the thing is, it's not just WWE booming. It's indie wrestling, and some of the recent happenings, I think, have shown how much it is booming. And you're a guy that goes to a lot of indie shows, and tell me, how much are you seeing that? How much are you seeing this boom and this upswing, and the crowds rising, and the talent levels growing and stuff like that?
Well, it's a great question, because gosh, do I go to a lot of independent shows. It's kind of hard to question to answer because each independent, wrestling promotion kind of has a different ebb and flow to it.
Yep.
You got promotions like the Northern Wrestling Federation that are just solid and have been for 20 years. And Les Thatcher was involved in starting the Northern Wrestling Federation. And actually, he's a friend of mine. He's somebody that I reached out to when I first got into independent wrestling in the area. We have lunch like once a month because he lives right up the road from me. And, it's just a tremendous thing to be able to just reach out to a guy like that and ask him questions or just hear what's on his mind because it's quite a bit, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But especially these days. But yeah, man, I think Rockstar Pro Wrestling's another place that we notably cover. It's probably the place we've covered the most, and that's a place that I've been going to for, I think, just, like over 3 years now, I think, or right around there. And it's one of those places where I've seen it go from a place that was, pretty cool, and you got to see some neat people and stuff like that, to folks that, or to a place that is just unreal. I mean, I've seen Tetsuya Naito there. I've seen, some of the biggest wrestlers in the world there. I mean, I just saw Jeff Cobb there. Shane Strickland used to wrestle there weekly when, no one knew who the hell he was. And, and there's many, many stories like that coming out of Rockstar Pro Wrestling. But, and that place has got its ebbs and flows as well that are slightly different because it's a different product from something like NWF.
Right.
And then, the other place that we go to the most would be Primetime Wrestling in Paris, Kentucky. And that's a place that's kind of just catching its foothold and just kind of getting to where it needs to be to really be, a spectacular product and something that that folks all over the world are going to want to watch.
Yeah.
Another place that we've gone to quite a bit that has a lot of history is IWA Mid-South, and they're unfortunately right in the middle of an ebb right now, but their ebbs and flows tend to come more quickly, it seems. It's like the ebbs and it flows in 50 times a year as opposed to some places that wave maybe take over 3 years to ebb and flow. So it's different for each place.
Yeah. You mentioned the NWF. I remember back when I was working, and this was in the early 2000s. We're talking 16, 17, 18 years ago, and they were young. I was working a lot here in the Central Indiana. They were young, and we were getting a lot of guys from Roger and them coming over. And I remember guys. I remember Pompano Joe, who I believe still works. And I worked him a lot. He used to be Pompano Joe and Jesse Hyde were a tag team from that area. And and I worked a lot with them. And but I remember there was a guy named Tiny Tim, and then there was this girl named Mercedes. And what was unique back then is there wasn't a lot of female talent. And Mercedes, she stood out, right? She was really, really, really good. And are you familiar with Mercedes?
No, I don't know who that is. I know everyone else that you mentioned.
Okay, well, you will. I assume you will. But she was really, really talented. And next thing you know, years later, she shows up on WWE TV. It's Jillian Hall. And
of course. Yes.
Yeah, so it's amazing, the talent that comes out of these places that people don't. There is no correlation there. People know Jillian Hall, but they don't remember Mercedes, out of Cincinnati from back in the day. And you see that stuff a lot. And it's always cool when you go to the indie shows now, or you watch the stuff online and whatever it may be, to try to say, okay, so who's the next guy? Who's the next wave, the next talent that's going to break out? And you can see guys. I remember seeing the Desmond Xaviers and the Zachary Wentz's when they first got started, and you can see, these guys have got it. And to watch them burst on the scene. So what kind of guys are you seeing out there now that, in your opinion, have the tools to be those next guys that maybe will expand on the national or international level and kind of make their mark?
Well, there's a couple different categories of guys. There's the young guys that are coming up, and then the guys that have been around that haven't gotten their recognition that they deserve yet. In the former category, I would, there's a lot of guys, man. It's really tough to kind of name folks without naming everybody. I mean, one of our favorites is a young guy named Lexus Montez, who is kind of, Japanese style wrestler, out of here, out of NWF, and he's been making waves all over the place recently. And, another one of our favorites is Aaron Williams, who would kind of go in the latter category. But there's a lot of guys that people don't know anything about. I mean, tonight, just before I talked to you, I interviewed a young tag team called the Bambino family.
Right.
And they're very young, and their upside is, their ceiling is very, very high. I mean, there's another tag team out of the area over there in Louisville named the Murphy Boys. That's another tag team that's has a very high ceiling. And there's a ton of guys like that. I mean, in the Northern Ohio area, up there at AIW, their entire roster is filled with guys like that. I mean, there's a guy up there named Magnum CK.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you've seen him. He is tremendous on the internet, and he's just getting started in pro wrestling, even though he's been around it for his whole life. And he is just outstanding. And he's a guy that you could see easily going on TV. There's a guy around here named Lord Crew that's tremendous. He's the current, was the current PTW champion. And then one of my favorite guys is Austin Tyler Morris, out of Georgetown, Kentucky, and he is a tremendous wrestler. And some of these guys people never even heard of. And that's how rewarding going to local independent pro wrestling, no matter how big or small it is. One of my favorite things about that is going to a show and seeing, a guy like Zachary Wentz as a security guard, and then seeing, what he's done now, and that's just, it makes you, one of the biggest things about pro wrestling is they always talk about, you got to get the crowd invested, right? And I'm invested in guys like that on a level that I could never be if I just saw some vignette, introducing their character, or if they just showed up on NXT one day and I didn't know who they were. I will always follow those guys' career till they get out of wrestling, because to me that's the ultimate fan investment, and why one of many reasons why independent pro wrestling in your local area, especially in the Midwest, is such a phenomenal source of entertainment.
Yep, absolutely. I have long now for several years have said that Aaron Williams is so underappreciated, that people should know who Aaron Williams is. And I mean, you see, it grows, but I know he's had some setbacks with some injuries and things. And Austin Tyler Morris is another. When I was working with Emerge and stuff, we used ATM, and Jordan Cage a lot would travel. They travel together, and Jordan Cage to me is just phenomenal. He is just so smooth in the ring. And stuff. Have you gotten to see PCO Pierre? I don't even know how you say his name now. The Mountie guy on his new resurgence here lately in the area.
Yeah, I have a funny story about him. I've recently been trying to really reach out and get more and more interviews with bigger guests. It's led me to talk to folks like Colt Cabana and Lanny Poffo and all kinds of folks that are all over the place. It's been great. And PCO is one of those guys that I reached out to. And so I what I did is I emailed him in French because I felt like that would be kind of an in, and so I emailed him French, and he and he wrote back, and I think this is a very PCO thing to do. He wrote back, just hit me on my cell. And I don't have a cell phone number, so that's where their conversation ended. So but it's been really fun to watch him, come along, and I think that his character is it's very pro wrestling, if that makes any sense. It's very winking at the camera, but also you could take it seriously if you wanted to. He really gets it. Yep. And I think that's very important, especially nowadays. I'm sure 30 years ago, these kinds of things would not be quite as over, or however you want to put it, as they would be today, just for the simple fact that some folks would say his character's disrespecting the business, or whatever the case may be. And, I think that what's awesome about pro wrestling now is that since, most of the fans are in on it, you get this multi-layered characters, that go on. A guy that recently faced PCO is a guy that's blowing up on the indie scene, who I got to interview recently, Marco Stunt. Right. And obviously, he could not defeat a guy like PCO in a fight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's obvious. And
Yeah.
any old, like Les Thatcher probably thinks that's the most ridiculous thing he's ever seen in his life, you know?
Yeah.
But the indie scene loves shit like that. I mean, that's their stuff. So, I mean, like, it's like things like that nowadays, you know, like I said, it's like this multi-layered form of entertainment that most people may look at and think is stupid on the surface. But, you know, I don't know how many people I've gotten to listen to my show and over time realize, man, there's really something to this pro wrestling thing. It's pretty awesome.
Yep. It's funny. I don't remember when it was. Sometime last year, I went to a Black Label Pro show up in Northern Indiana. And, you know, they had PCO was on the show. And it was just an afterthought to me, you know, when he was going to be on there. And I thought, you know, the Quebecer guy. I mean, seriously, it just didn't seem to fit to me with the other talent they had on the show. And he comes out, you know, and you could just tell, right? He was older, he was a little battered, and I thought, man, this is going to be rough. I just had this one, and then it's like that match started, and he went a whole nother level, and I thought, holy shit, what is this? I mean, where was this guy in that WWE run? It's like I don't remember him. It's so cool to see guys like that. And that are, you know, and because of that, and podcasting and all these other avenues in modern times, some of these guys getting this resurgence, you know, and this second spotlight thing, and getting, you know, to make a little more money and prolong their careers. It's so very, very cool, and that they're doing it on their terms, and, you know, independently, and setting their own dates and setting their own schedules, and more, like, because when I was working in these last 10, 15 years. There were not guys that were making a living at professional wrestling unless you were, you know, under contract to a major promotion. And now it's like more and more and more every year. There are guys that are making a living just off of professional wrestling and doing it independently. It's pretty remarkable on the way the business is right now.
Yeah. I mean, someone like yourself has a unique perspective on that because you've actually tried to make a living as a professional wrestler, and maybe did back in the day. I'm not sure. No. I don't know a ton.
Not even close.
Fair enough. I don't know a ton about your history. I don't want to make any assumptions, you know. But okay. It's one of those things where you know, you have a unique perspective and kind of could talk about things like that more than someone like myself, where, you know, I'm very interested in that side of things, because to me, you know, pro wrestling has changed so much in just the short time that I've been into it as much as I've been. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. I mean, you know, the other day, I don't remember, I guess it was Hell in a Cell. You know, one of the matches was AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe for the WWE Championship.
Yep.
3 years ago, if someone had said that was a future pay-per-view match, they would have said, you're insane. That will never happen.
That's right.
And you know, and of course it did happen. And you know, the other night I was watching Heidi Lovelace wrestle Ronda Rousey on my television.
Yep.
I mean, it's just the possibilities are endless. And if tomorrow somebody, you know, the news on the dirt sheets was that Hulk Hogan's returning to wrestle Shinsuke Nakamura in a three-way with Okada at New Japan Pro Wrestling, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just because that's one of the greatest things about pro wrestling, and it reminds me of sports a lot. You know, sports have all these stories that go on all the time, and that's why there's millions of sports shows all over the country that are constantly have things to talk about, and pro wrestling's just like that. Only it's even crazier,
oh, yeah.
You know, and it's, I mean, and just when you think you've heard the craziest thing you've ever heard, just get ready, because it's just going to change again. And, you know, not to go on and on here, but one thing that a cliche that I always say on my show, and I always say to people, is that whether you love it or you like it, something in pro wrestling, whether you love something or you like it, cherish it or don't worry. And what I mean is that if you love it, cherish it. If you don't like it, don't worry, because it's going to change here real soon. Yep. So, you know, whether it's just someone's character, if they're going to turn heel or face or whatever the case may be, or if it's something crazy like, you know, I mean, I don't even know what the latest news is, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, guys from the Bullet Club are looking to come to WWE now. Yep. And, you know, it's just insane. So,
yeah, and it's funny because the way things are going, I saw that, you know, that there was this rumor of, hey, this is going to happen in January. And if you had said this a few months ago, I said, nah, never would happen. It's not going to happen. And then more and more I think, well, it may happen. And the more and more we get closer, I think, you know what, this may happen, but it might be on these unconditional terms because these guys, who knows, these guys might come in, but it might not be your typical, contract type deal. It's, I mean, a year or 2 years ago, AJ Styles coming to WWE would not have got to keep his name. Because Vince has always been very big on, we don't need the name. We'll make our own characters. We'll make our own name. And it's just so, I mean, it's Samoa Joe using his name. And I think, you hear these meetings that, WWE's meeting with Impact, and there's the rumors that it's about the tape library and on the network and different things. And all this seems so unreasonable not too long ago, but as rapidly as the climate's changing, and it's, I mean, we've got freaking Ring of Honor selling out Madison Square Garden. And I mean, it's just all these things that are just, it's mind blowing to me. And it's, like you said, it's getting to this point where, you know what, anything you say, I don't know if I'd say it's unreachable at this point with the way things are.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. And the only thing I'm always leery of, though, is that, a lot of times fans are, one of the big talking points on the internet and Reddit and all this stuff is always, which guy do you want to see from, your favorite non-WWE promotion make it to WWE? Yeah. And I'm always very leery about stuff like that because, they are a whole different product. They are a broad product that is supposed to appeal to everyone. And so because of that, a guy like Nakamura, for example, he just can't be the guy that you saw, knock, kneeing people's heads off in Japan. He just can't do that. Yep. And so, I'm always leery when folks are like, oh, when are the Young Bucks going to make it to WWE or whatever the case may be? When they do, if it's not on their terms, it's not going to be good. Nope. I mean, look at how much bullcrap we had to see from Matt Hardy to finally get something good. Yep. I mean, it took quite a while, and I felt really bad for him. I mean, I know he made lots of money, and I know he did what he wanted to do, but, it's like no matter what situation you're in, if you go to WWE, your creative, your ability to express yourself is going to be stifled and controlled. Yep. One of the great things about the independents is that, sometimes I go to an independent show and maybe it's organized, maybe it's not, but I can't tell. Yep. And the reason that I can't tell is because the people they've hired to put in the ring are pros. Yep. And they are going to do what they do. And no one's going to tell them one way or the other because they are who they are. And that's kind of what makes some of the magic that you see on the independents that cannot happen on television with millions of people watching at 8 o'clock on a Monday night. Yep. So, I want people to go where they want to go. I mean, obviously I got no say in it anyway, but I'm always, I'm leery though, whenever I hear like, oh, Kenny Omega's going to be in the Royal Rumble. And I'm kind of like, well, I hope not. Yep. Unless that's what he wants, you know. So, but just my opinion, of course.
Yeah, I think it's also unique, in the WWE when you have, two guys that are in a match or, you see it all the time, right? And it's always overexposed and they'll run it dozens of times and whatever else. You go to an indie show, see two guys, they may have worked 100 times against each other in all these areas, but it'd be the first time you've seen it. And so it'll have that new approach, and you're reaping the benefits of that experience while seeing it with new eyes. It's hard to get that with the overexposure that WWE has sometimes. And everybody's clamoring to see Styles Joe, but then after a while you're like, okay, I don't want any more Styles Joe. I've seen enough of it, but they are good together. But it's like, there is something to be said for the overexposure. And when you go to an indie show, that's running, whatever, maybe once a month, usually at most. You're not, there's not as much overexposure. There's I don't know. There's more of an, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. Maybe more of an innocence, more of a, I don't know. The atmosphere to let go and be able to get lost in it is, I think it's a little easier to kind of, I don't know. Maybe the curtain's not pulled back quite as much as it is on WWE with the oversaturation and the, I don't know, 50 hours of television they have a week and everything else. I'm not a big WWE guy. To be frank, I watch some, but I usually skim it. And there's certain guys and certain parts I like, and the rest I just, I don't know. I just don't. I don't. I'm not a big WWE guy. And I even when I was a kid, I wasn't necessarily a big WWE guy. I was much more a backer of the NWA and some of that stuff. So maybe I'm the wrong guy to chime in on WWE topics because it comes out, sounding very bitter on my part.
Well, that's okay because I completely understand, and I don't. Honestly, man, I started. If nobody out there knows, typically on Monday nights at 8:00, I go live on Facebook with, various folks from the area, professional wrestlers, and I've had many, many, many folks on there. And, it's something I like to do. And I started doing that because I was so bored watching Raw, and I felt obligated to watch it because it's kind of like, it's the touch point. It's the cornerstone for pro wrestling fans, and I feel kind of obligated to watch it. And honestly, my enjoyment of that show magnified quite a bit when I stopped listening to it and I started turning the sound down because it's not their fault, but the announcing on that show, and this isn't anything no one's heard before, but it is just terrible. And to relay that to sports a little bit, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I am very lucky because we have one of the greatest sports announcers of all time here in town, and his name is Marty Brenneman.
Yep, absolutely.
And he has been announcing Reds games on the radio for, like 40 years or something like that. And he is tremendous. And if you've never listened to Marty Brenneman, one of the things that I love about him is that when you talk to him in person, which I've done a couple times, he sounds the same as he does on the radio. Now, let's take his son, Tom Brenneman, for example, okay, who is your generic Joe Buck kind of announcer that you hear today and kind of what the guys on WWE are trying to emulate. If you talk to him in person, he sounds like a normal person. If you hear him on TV, he's like, whoa, and he's got this ridiculous over-the-top voice. And, I am guilty. Sometimes on the podcast, I, get a little energy behind my voice and I start doing, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I'm not changing the pitch of my voice to, and that's one of the things that was really frustrating for me is that, when you go to an independent show, you don't hear the announcers.
Right.
When you go to a WWE house show, which if obviously you've done, but if anyone out there listening has never done, that is a tremendous experience.
It is.
Because you don't hear the announcers. All you get to see is what is being told in the ring. And that's why independent pro wrestling, also New Japan Pro Wrestling, is kind of my favorite type of wrestling because you may be able to seek out a vignette here and there and an interview here and there for some of these guys. But everything that you see when you're there is told in the ring. And pro wrestling at its core is telling a story through body movement. And if you're not doing that, if you're trying to, it's like in movies, they say, show me, don't tell me. And that's what pro wrestling is at its core. Show me, don't tell me. And so when they're just constantly telling you and beating you over the head with stuff, it's just it's annoying, and I can't stand it. So that's why I watch it with the sound down.
Have you ever been to an indie show where they've tried to do the live commentary over the PA?
I've watched them on television before. It's horrible. Awful.
It's horrible. I hate it. I actually walked out of one time, and I won't. This was a long time ago, but I can't stand it. It drove me nuts. But I listened to many Reds games as a child. I'm not a Reds fan. I'm a Cardinals fan. But I live. I know. And, but it's funny that you say you say Joe Buck because my guy was his dad, Jack Buck. And but of course I didn't get the St. Louis station here but I got the Cincinnati station. So and it's remarkable to me to think. I look at, like my kids and other kids today, and I thought, you know what? I don't think they could sit there and spend 2 to 3 hours listening to a baseball game on the radio and have the experience that I had anymore with all this overexposure of the sensories and the short attention spans. And I think you're right though. I don't think I don't know if it's much that or it's just the delivery that everything, there's so much of it out there that it all just kind of blurs together and it sounds the same. It's very vanilla. I don't know. I mean, there was once upon a time wrestling was broadcast on the radio, and that'd be something that I'd love to hear. Of course, it'd have to be the right guys, and we're talking decades ago, but that'd be an amazing experience to hear something like that. But I don't know. I don't think there's guys out there that could pull it off nowadays. I don't know.
There's a guy. So Primetime Wrestling in Paris, Kentucky. That is a promotion owned by this jerk. This guy is a real piece of crap. His name's Daryl Kelly. If you see him, punch him in the face. But his the guy that books down there is legendary Larry D.
Oh yeah,
he's an Aaron Williams type, which is he's one of these guys that is just on that edge. Just any minute now, he's just going to blow up again. And everyone's going to know who he is. And they have an announcer by the name of DJ Otis Badass, and that sounds like a stupid name, but this guy is awesome, and he is he's an FM DJ, right?
Uh-huh.
And but he's not like a morning zoo type of DJ. He's great. He's got a wonderful voice. He's awesome on the microphone. He's tremendous doing commentary, and me and him have had many conversations about, man, we got to get this stuff on the radio. We got to figure out how to get this stuff on the radio because I just feel like that, whether it's old timers like me and you or it's just new folks, I think that audience is there. I think it's much smaller than it used to be, obviously, because now instead of turning on your AM radio, you're able to turn on Spotify and listen to any, podcast like the Road Home from Wrestling podcast or the Dave Dynasty podcast that you would like, or any song that you want at the touch of a button, which makes, those things out there. But, I think that if that could be in like podcast form or something like that, I think that's something that could be possible if you get the right guys doing it.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's an original angle they could to bring some of that listenership back. They got to reach out there and try something. It's funny because I don't know the radio. When I think the radio and wrestling, in my experience with independent wrestling, it's always I've always worked with promotions that have worked very closely with local radio stations to do promotions. I've done a lot of radio spots and going in on morning shows. But here's a story that there are people that know it, obviously, if they're familiar with my career, but I've never told this on the show. Not something I publicly put out there. But here we have a local station. It's the big pop station here in town. It's been for forever. And when I was a manager still at the time, and they had the hot DJ on the morning show. His name was Alan Dare, and we did several weeks this whole build up with me on his show and all these things and all this stuff. And he came out to the show that night, and me and him had an arm wrestling contest, right? The age-old radio DJ against manager arm wrestling contest. And, of course, I lost. But the stipulation was, as to lose, they had to put me in a diaper. So I did the age-old manager with a diaper and a bib and all this and that. Lo and behold, I didn't know, but Q-Mix, the radio station, had a photographer there, and this picture ran in the local newspaper of me and this DJ, and it was immortalized. And I remember literally years later, when I was no longer even an active wrestler, being out somewhere and somebody coming by and saying, "Oh, look, it's Diaper Dave." And all those years later, remembering me from that. And I thought, that's what my legacy is going to be. They're going to remember me as Diaper Dave. But then I thought, well, I guess, as long as they remember me, I guess.
Yeah.
Enough, man. So.
Well, that's an interesting subject right there because, one of the things that I am constantly blown away by, and a guy that everybody knows that can do this is Kevin Owens. Yep. Is it a heel who can get egg on his face constantly, lose every match, and still be credible? Yep. And that's like an intangible thing that you really don't see very often. NWF has a guy. He does a lot of the training. He's one of their top guys. His name's Jay Donaldson. He's been around a long time. Yep. And he is a genius at that. I mean, he gets he does spots where like he'll see a bunch of guys do a dive and he'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to do a dive." And he'll just completely rack himself on the ropes, know, and I mean, it's just tremendous funny stuff. He's always got egg on his face as a bad guy, but he's still got that mean streak, and he's still a kind of guy that you can heat up any second and go for the title, and it's legitimate. And, and I think that, that's something that sometimes guys with there's egos in wrestling. If you don't have an ego, then you have no interest in being in wrestling, first of all, so, and sometimes guys aren't willing to do stuff like that. And I commend you for that. I mean, that's awesome.
Well, as the heel manager at that time, it was almost like it was an obligation. I had to, that was the stuff. And I didn't care. It's like, I really didn't, because I thought if they're laughing or if they're doing whatever, at least they're reacting, and that's all I cared. Is just get them to do something. So I studied the cornets and the Heenans and everything else, and I would do all the stuff, stepping through the ropes and acting like my foot got caught, tripping and taking a bump, and getting into the ring and stuff like that, just to get them to laugh. I didn't care. I did all the gimmicks. I did the eating dog food thing, the being in the dog kennel thing, all the age old gimmicks, just short of being tarred and feathered. But it was okay because, it was fun. I enjoyed it. And later I did. It made it a little difficult later because I transitioned into actually being a worker. And it took a while to shake that, I was still. So I had to still work that style, right? I had to. People remembered me being in the diaper and eating dog food and stuff. They don't believe that all of a sudden I just flipped a switch and I'm something I'm not, So I had to work that cowardly style still, and I think it worked. It was okay, but I think I was better as a manager than in ring. But whatever. but I enjoyed doing that stuff. I'm not a huge proponent on comedy wrestling, just being forced into it. But I think comedy can naturally be a part of wrestling if it's worked within the schematic of it, and things that like that. A trip at the right spot or whatever it might be is comedic, and without forcing something over the top into it. So it is what it is. If I've got to be Diaper Dave, I got to be diaper. Somewhere around here, I actually have a picture of me in that diaper, and now that this is going to be out, I may have to put it out on social media and just
please
totally go full exposure on it. It's actually a Polaroid. It's because that was that was the thing there. So yeah, we'll have to see how well that scans, but so. I'll have to dig that out. So, well, I think let's wrap this up. And Drew or Andy, sorry, I didn't know what to call you there, but Andy, thanks for coming on. Why don't you tell everybody where they can check your show out and check you out on social media and everything, and follow you to keep up with what you're doing.
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter. That's a great place to find me. I'm at Drewcifer Tweets on Twitter, and also you can follow the show, the Road Home from Wrestling podcast, at the Road Home FW on Twitter. We're also on Facebook. We're on. You can follow me on Facebook at Drewcifer Jones and check out all those Facebook Live videos. Also, those usually make it onto the podcast feed as an audio podcast as well. Let's see here. You can also check us out on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you can find us on, any of these podcast apps. We're on all of them. I urge folks to do this for Dave Dynasty. Do it for me as well. Right. Go on iTunes and, leave us a review. It's very important. And I know that there's thousands of people out there listening to the Road Home from Wrestling podcast, and only like 60 of them have left reviews. So come on, guys, let's get on that. Right. One of them's me, so that's not fair, yeah. But, you can find our merchandise at whatamaneuver.net, and, you could check us out at shows like, Primetime Wrestling. We're going to be at NWF. We're going to be up at Rockstar Pro. Every once in a while, we make it up to AIW, IWA, Mid-South Remix Pro, and various other independent wrestling shows that I'm missing out on, and I apologize to those folks whose name, PWF and Paradigm Pro Wrestling. I mean, there's so many of them, and we try to get to all of them if we can, and, it's a really great thing, and, you'll like our show. We have a very comedic kind of twist on things and a lot of inside jokes. If you're ever wondering why we're laughing, just hit me up on Twitter, and I'll tell you all about it.
That's right. Yeah, so everybody always says support indie wrestling, but don't forget to support the other avenues out there. Support the podcast, support the photographers, the bloggers, all these other things. Remember, indie wrestling is not just what happens in the ring. There's a whole network of people out there supporting this and helping spread the word. So support them all. Support Andy and his show. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we have an interview with Akira, so stick around. If you are looking for the best books, DVDs, and posters on classic wrestling nostalgia, then you want to visit crowbarpress.com. There are literally dozens of titles there, including biographies of the likes of Bruiser Brody, Ole Anderson, Ivan Koloff, and of course, Dick the Bruiser, as we've spoke about here on the Dave Dynasty Show. You want to visit crowbarpress.com for all of your classic wrestling nostalgia needs. Again, that is crowbarpress.com.
And welcome back to the Dave Dynasty Show. I am your co-host, Ike Isaacs, and today I'm joined with yet again another amazing talent we have with us today, Akira. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic.
Rock on. Hey, that's not too bad, not too bad. Well, hey, we're going to go ahead and jump right into this on this beautiful of Tuesday nights. First question, as always, where are you from, Akira?
From anywhere in the Midwest. I really don't have a place that I call home, just like I don't have a position that I call home. I am a Ronian at heart, a lawn.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. You know what they say, if you have no home, that means every place you go is a home, isn't that right? But, so I guess the next question for you then, we'll go ahead and jump right into that. Besides of being where you're from, being from everywhere, being from a little place of everywhere, were you always a fan of wrestling? Is that something that you've always been prior to being a wrestler?
I grew up around wrestling ever since I was 2. Believe it or not, my family had me surrounded by fighting, boxing, sports in general. I was even surrounded with things like Beavis and Butthead, MTV. That warped my personality, if you will, and certainly led me to being a very different child than most.
Nothing wrong with being different. That's my philosophy on life. Nothing wrong with being different. And I would definitely say that I was growing up around those similar things, so definitely I have and do have a warped mind as well. So growing up,
what is wrestling if not for being a warped mind?
Right, exactly. I mean, how many people can watch two half naked people in a ring wrestle and not be a little warped? You know? No, I'm kidding.
I grew up death match, and I was watching that when I was like 5. So I mean, you tell me where I'm at in my mind frame.
You're just like, man, I was seeing people doing Taipei death matches when I was coming out of the womb. Let's be real here.
You're not wrong. I'm telling you, are wired differently. We're just nuts from the get-go. We've never been normal, despite what people think.
Right. And that's okay, though. Being wired differently from the get-go, it takes you places. I found that to be the truth.
Heavens, I hope.
Right. So, having grown up in this kind of different setting, what was your, obviously outside of being a little warped, what was your childhood like? Did you play any sports?
When I grew up, childhood was a little rough. I'm from the Midwest, and everywhere I went, I was the only Asian kid, and I was surrounded by country, so I got picked on a lot. But I grew up basically playing every sport you can imagine: football, basketball, baseball, swimming, track. The only one I actually did not enter was wrestling, and I just had no interest in it. But lo and behold, here I am, like 10 years later, doing the exact thing. Man, so life has a funny way of coming at you, kicking you in the butt.
You can't help but to appreciate the irony just a little bit, right?
Oh, I always appreciate the coaches in high school and in junior high. They'd always been like trying to harass me to quit swimming, which I was good at, and I college for. And they're like, you're so good. They're like, you're flexible. You always manage to outmaneuver and outweigh wrestlers, like our main athletes. And I was like, yeah, man, I don't really want to. I know I could be good at it, but swimming was kind of my thing. And like that training schedule. But here I am now doing something even worse than what they were doing.
Right.
So the irony does fall on me, and it hits me like a brain buster. It doesn't.
That's a good analogy. It hits you like a brain buster.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. So we kind of talked about like those beginning stages. So you said you grew up around wrestling. So when you were younger, who were some of your favorite wrestlers that you saw on TV?
The weird thing is, like me now, I never had like a particular favorite. There's always a little bit something about everybody that I liked.
Right.
Came to like Pomp and Circumstance, it was Stone Cold, but then when it came to technicality, it was, and even seeing like the occasional Japanese wrestling through my uncle, it was like the old, like that, just a little bit.
You know, that's not a bad thing either, because if you can see a little bit of good in everybody, that kind of opens you up to not have.
That's
Go ahead.
That's the nature of being a wrestler and being an artist. And just being a student of any game in general, is you can't learn from a little something from anybody, things what to do, things what not to do, things that stand out, things that do not stand out. You really shouldn't like be in any sort of like artistic endeavor, because life is about learning, life is about gaining experience from everything, no matter what it is. Like, as I'm always told by every veteran wrestler, if you're not learning something from any match, from any person, you should probably just, get out.
Right, because if you're not learning, you're not progressing, you're not getting better. You're just
exactly.
You're getting stale.
That's the one thing I never want to do is stagnate. And I see so many wrestlers that stagnate because they find that one thing that they're good at, and it gets old over time. You've seen it for decades. Like, the history of wrestling has showcased it. If you stick with the same thing over time, you're going to eventually be passed by. And that's the beauty of people like, say, Chris Jericho, who constantly evolve and change and adapt to the game. I mean, Christopher Daniels is another prime example. He's not as, renowned as Jericho in the mainstream, but he's always adapting. He's always changing. He's never wrestled the same.
Right. I would say I feel like Christopher Daniels is probably one of the best examples, because he's been wrestling for so long, and he's also changed so much since he first started wrestling that he's almost a completely different person.
Exactly, same with Jericho.
Right, exactly. He's so much different than what he was in WCW compared to now.
There's different eras of those wrestlers, and people are allowed to look at those eras and be like, this is what I love. Like, and you can say the same thing about promotions. They change and develop, whether it's Ring of Honor, whether it's Impact, whether it's WWE, or any other set of promotions like All Japan. They have changed and they've developed, and their styles have changed, and there's things that people can like or dislike about anything. I don't like eternally by everybody, and that's not my goal. My goal is to be artistically fulfilled, but also to satisfy the consumer.
Absolutely. Because if you don't satisfy the consumer, you don't have a job anymore.
Exactly. People like to think that the money comes from the promoters, and sometimes they take money out and they just invest in entire. But generally, with repeat shows, with repeat promotions that you do work for, the money it comes from the consumer. That's how any business works. And I feel like people that just wrestle, I'm going to wrestle this style because ha ha ha. The consumer, they're basically wrestling for themselves, and nobody wants that. You want to wrestle for yourself, but it's just like a musician. You play music for yourself, but you to make money with it. Otherwise, just do it at home.
Exactly. You're right. If you just wanted to play music, you could just do that in your living room, quite literally. But
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to build.
If you're in it to make a living,
right.
Yeah, if you're in it to make a living, you have to have some marketability about it. Like, there can be like the most obscure death metal in the world, and sure, you're going to find a subset of a will listen to it, but are you going to make a lot of money off of it? No. And if you did change it, that subset of a fan base would. So you kind of put yourself in a hole, and the same thing can be said for wrestling.
So that was a good tangent, because I like that, because that kind of it portrays the sort of a character that is Akira in this case, is that you kind of have that developmental over time, where you kind of have that different, you evolve basically. You always, not necessarily that you're changing, but you're slowly but surely getting better and better and better, but never stopping. And that actually kind of leads to my next kind of question. Go right ahead.
I would say this, from when I started earlier this year to now, the drastic change in how I wrestle and who I am it's very shocking. If you look at it, it's not even comparable to what I was. I'm a very different beast, and I hope to continue that trend of developing, whether it's character or my wrestling.
Right. So, and honestly, that kind of actually leads into the next sort of question I had for you, because obviously we kind of know where that passion for wrestling started. We kind of know where you kind of got that physical mentality with the sports that you play, swimming and the baseball, all that. The other question would here be is that at what point did you know that wrestling had hooked you, and that you said, hey, this is what I want to do, and when did you start training for that?
The weird thing is, I didn't really think I want to be a wrestler until I went to college and started learning about marketing and whatnot, because I'd fallen out of really wrestling just due to being burnt out and really being the only fan. And eventually I was only one. Every kid kind of did that. And when it started to turn more PG, and I didn't really get it anymore. It didn't click with me, so I kind of phased that. And the friends, and they got me back into wrestling. I went to independent wrestling shows. I started watching Ring of Honor, New Japan, all Noah, things like Dragon Gate, and I was just getting all these different styles, and I started to really understand wrestling as a sport. I started to understand as a style, and really it was around the time NXT really started to flourish that I was really watching all the time. Around the time I graduated college, and I was with my life, working various different hard jobs, missing being a college athlete, being a swimmer, I decided I miss being artistic, because nobody wanted to play music with me, because I wanted to unique rather than generic radio rock. And artistic, I wanted to be athletic. I wanted to fight, but I didn't really have an interest in stepping into the cage. That kind of developed as I started really training in wrestling.
Right.
It was around 2016, and I was like, okay, I got to find a school. I got to find something. And it took me a while to find a suitable school. And eventually, I dropped out of my factory job, got the money for training, and then I decided to start training. And I drove 3 hours one way just to go train.
Yikes. I mean, that shows commitment, because literally, you said 3 hours one way, so I mean, to get home at night, you're literally driving 6 hours just to go train.
Oh, no, I went to my trainer's house just so I could get as much floor.
Jeez. So, I mean, that alone kind of shows like that drive, like you said. I mean, you have to have that drive. You have to have that want. And then with your training, tell us about your training. Tell us how that kind of formulated, how that started, and how that was able to transition you into like getting into the wrestling business.
Well, when I started training, it was that kind of fan understanding. But as over time, I started to really like certain that at the time were niche wrestlers like Minoru Suzuki before he really started getting Western fame and praise. But I would say that way I was training, going to my trainer's house, staying 2 to 3 days, sleeping on his floor, putting in hours and hours and hours in the ring just so I could do it and be ready faster than anybody else. It turned wrestling from something I like to something more or less that is my religion. Wrestling is my heart and soul, and when I'm in that ring, I pour my heart into it. Whether I'm training, I pour my heart into it. And over time, my training style adapted from just being the stereotypical TV wrestler who, I'm going to do a couple moves, to really having my own style that I'm still developing to this day. Because it went from training in Terre Haute, Indiana at New Wave Pro under Blake Reed to watching tapes, watching catch wrestling tapes, reading catch wrestling, reading and developing my striking, my legitimate grappling, because I wanted to have that legitimacy that nobody else does. I always get a couple remarks of how, Akira's a shooter, ha, ha, ha. They like to joke that I am not legit. But if you get in that ring, I normally don't play around. I almost shoot wrestle to a point. I'm much more of a fighter than I was to start off with. When I started off with, I was kind of like this weird luchador, CM Punk kind of guy. Now I'm much more of a pure wrestler kind of guy. And I guess you could say my Asian roots fall in that. But when I went to L.A. this April and I trained under Katsuyori Shibata and Scorpio Sky, I found what I wanted to do stylistically. I wanted to have a little bit of flash, but I wanted to be that hard-hitting, submission grappling, strong as an ox wrestler that Karl Gotch and all the old-time wrestlers wanted. I didn't want to be someone who did a lot of flips and a lot of dives. I wanted to be someone that you believed I was knocking your face and you believed I was tearing your arm out. You believed that when I was kicking you, I wanted to kill you.
Right.
And I've been developing that style since April.
Absolutely. And obviously that kind of, you obviously mentioned this too, but it kind of has that approach to, strong style and catch wrestling where you're trying to put that legitimacy back into it. You're trying to put that, I guess you could say, go ahead.
I like watching all kinds of wrestling, whether it is the lucha style, whether it is the more American style, like the more high-flying style.
Right.
I like watching it, and I have a little bit of things in my arsenal that you could consider high-flying. But at my core, I wanted to make sure all those things had an aggressiveness that not a lot of wrestlers have. A lot of them seem to run through the motions, and I wanted to be, he's got him in the sleeper, he's tearing his head off. I'm kicking you as hard as I can. I'm chopping you as hard as I can. I want people, when they watch me, even if they think, wrestling is predetermined, they're watching me and going, oh, my God. I think one of my favorite remarks that I've ever gotten from a match was a couple of my friends were watching me, and they had a couple people and families watching me and going, can he do that? As I was kicking the crap out of this guy. And my friend just smiled and said, yes, you can.
You're just like, if someone's questioning whether or not I should or could be doing this, I'm doing something right.
Yes. I think the ability of a wrestler, just like the ability of a movie, to sink someone into a match and not be so concerned about getting this is awesome chance, but people going, like getting that suck of air, or that, holy crap, he kicked out of that, from after I brutally kicked someone's head, and that is the magic of wrestling to me. Getting people to sink into the story and not be so concerned about cheering or saying really dumb chants, unless it's like the wrestler's name,
right,
or whether it's my name. That is in essence what I want wrestling to be. I understand that I can't change the tide of how the fans are acting, but when people are watching me, I want them to feel something different. I want them to feel that rawness, that primal urge that not a lot of wrestling has.
No, absolutely. And like you said, it kind of puts that, that's actually a good way to phrase that rawness, kind of putting that heat back into it, if you will, because, back in the day, this is kind of how they did it. It was basically them getting in there and just beating the crap out of each other, where now you're just kind of putting that heat back into it, saying, we're trying to make this more legitimate, like it used to be, kind of like you mentioned.
A lot of people have a weird phrase for their style, or how they wrestle. I like to call mine beautiful brutality, because when I'm hitting you, it doesn't look like I'm pulling any punches. I'm hitting you with my forearm. I am palm striking you. I am kicking you, and it proves whether someone is tough or not. That part of me wants to wrestle people that wrestle like that. I don't want to stay stagnant with people that are trying to wrestle. I want to face these guys that are willing to put up a fight and are willing just to go back and forth, and make people just in awe at what we're doing. Because I think that was the best part about things of like old Ring of Honor, with people like Samoa Joe and like Ken Kobashi, and like when ROH brought over the NOAH guys, and they're just beating the crap out of each other, and people are just, the crowd is alive just because it is so real. There's nobody questioning it. There's no dumb chance. It's, oh, this guy's going to kill you. This guy's going to kill you. They're into it. Right. A sense of primal rawness that a lot of like wrestling promotions don't have.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's a very appreciated, I guess you could almost say a breath of fresh air. You know, like you said, a lot of the stuff is just kind of like that, mass stadium rock kind of faux stuff that you kind of look at. And I guess that's a good way to put it. This is the stadium rock of wrestling. People are just doing it to do it, and there's no flavor. It's just kind of bland. You're kind of putting
and they don't leave people hungry for more.
Right.
It's I'm going to get all my stuff in. Watch me. Okay. See you guys next time. But they've already seen everything. Wrestling now is on the rise, which I'm very happy for. I'm never going to knock other wrestlers, because wrestling's on the rise for a reason. Wrestling's becoming cool again, which is great for people like me, especially because that more niche style can grow. I wouldn't say the style I wrestle is the punk rock, the antithesis to, say, like disco or the stadium rock, as you put it. I would say the style that I wrestle, and a style that a few people are wrestling now, is more the heavy metal, that British wave of heavy metal, the Japanese wave of heavy metal. That is going to rise, and I think is going to take prominence again, just because it's so different. And I think it'll flourish with those other styles, which I think wrestling is great for. It shouldn't be just one style. It should be a plethora of styles that stand out, that come together. And I think that's what makes a perfect wrestler, is a style that can wrestle with any other style.
Right. It's something that can just mesh well and can kind of blend, and, not just make yourself look good, but can also make other people look good.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's all about the appearance, obviously. So if you're putting on that great show, you can kind of support somebody else where they lack, and vice versa, of course.
Exactly.
And actually, the next kind of thing I wanted to ask you, and you kind of already mentioned it, I mean, independent wrestling right now is like on fire. And, we have a lot of great talent to explain for that. But obviously, there are, of course, some drawbacks to independent wrestling and wrestling in general. So in your opinion, what would you say is the best and worst part of being in independent wrestling?
I think the best part is that the business is booming, and there's so much more ways to make money. And that's what we want to do at the end of the day, is make money, make a profit, make a living. There's some people that say they want it, but they don't really have the drive for it. But it's so much more possible now than, say, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago to do that now, because people like the Young Bucks have paved that way, and they showed, hey, there's a way to make money off merchandising. There's a way to make money off of touring. It's just you have to be willing to sacrifice things like, having a family or spending time with that family. But that's part of what we accept when we become wrestlers. We also accept the fact that we're going to sacrifice our bodies. We're going to sacrifice our hopes, dreams, and tears. That's just the name of the game. It's just like the name of the game in music. You expect that, and if you don't expect that, you're going to get eaten alive. But I think the worst part of independent wrestling, anyways, too much of it. And I don't mean it's bad. I mean, there's a lot of bad with the good, whether it's bad wrestlers, whether it's bad promotions, whether it's bad promoters, or even you could say that bad wrestlers that honestly, if they were on any sports team in college or what have you, and they got pushed and they got yelled at, they wouldn't last because they're not athletes at the core. They're just in it, because wrestling is fun. When I hear like wrestling is for everyone, that phrase alone irks me because no, it isn't. Right. Wrestling is for everyone as a fan. But when it comes to being a wrestler and being an athlete and wanting to be the best, no, it is not for everybody. Because when I went to L.A. and I trained in the dojo, it wasn't for everybody. There was people that were throwing up. There was a guy that quit on the first day because his body couldn't hold it. Right. But that proves who is the elite and who isn't, who wants it and who is not. And that mentality, I think, is missed in wrestling because I do hear stories of how, yes, you can pay $500 and get training. I mean, that's what I did. And I'm not going to knock people that do that. But I also sacrifice a lot of my time with family, a lot of time with friends. I sacrifice my body and my health sometimes. I was training when I was, like, deathly ill with mono. And I kept training. I kept watching. I didn't make excuses. But there's a lot of people that would not last a minute in a MMA training session, let alone a legitimate dojo training session.
Absolutely. And actually, I can't remember who it was. Someone said something very similar. Someone else that I was interviewing the other day, and it was obviously say there's too much of it. You know, the sport or the field of work that we're in it's saturated. There's so much of it. There's so many people who think they can do it, and like you said, it's not for everybody. Not everybody can compete at this level, like you mentioned. Only the few that are able to push themselves, like you mentioned, can. But people think that they can, and that just kind of, like you said, kind of waters it down and just makes it kind of so-so in this case.
They're the kind of people that when they do get hurt, they get really melodramatic about it rather than either working through it or keeping their mouth shut about it and just driving forward. I recently worked through a pinched nerve and a bunch of other stuff that's made it really hard to move, but I've never complained about it. I'm still taking 2-3 bookings a weekend. I want to do 4 or 5 or 6. And I'll work through that because that's the name of the game. And most people don't understand that elite athletic level because they've never been in it.
Exactly. And it's almost like you can't expect them to ever understand it because they'll never be at that level in this case.
No, it's just like people that think you're selfish because you want to devote all your time to wrestling when it's just like, when you want to be the best, you have to. You have to devote everything to it. You can't, like, trying to think of the proper phrase for it. The first time in this interview, I have legitimately become lost for words. I think that people that have performed at an elite level will continue performing at an elite level. If you understand the sacrifice it takes to be the best, you would understand it.
Right.
But most people, they don't. And that's why they rely on their gimmicks. They don't rely on the athleticism because the gimmick's going to get them over, but eventually that gimmick's going to get old, get stale, unless they evolve. Because in the end, I do believe ring work or something special about what you do in the ring stands over a silly little character. But I do believe that you need to have a character and you need to have in-ring skills. They kind of go one and the same in order to have that tenure. Otherwise, it's going to be you're just a character or you're just a wrestler. This business needs both.
Exactly. And something I've also kind of talked to other people about is also that a character is not forever. How you work, how you present yourself, how you operate, that does, however, last forever. How people perceive you, you know.
There are very few wrestlers that can say they have made at least in this era, I believe, that have made a tenure or made a name for themselves just by the wrestling alone. Right. But even then, I do believe that they have a character, like, say, Katsuyori Shibata. I mean, his character was the wrestler, but with that name and like came a very stubborn, prideful fighter that would never back down. He'd take a hit and he'd give it back to you. And there's character in that, just like there's character in a beautiful sadist like Minoru Suzuki, who in his nature is, yes, just a wrestler, but he's such a psychotic, demented fighter that it stands out. you can still have a basis in reality with your character and still make a name with it, but you have to, well, I guess you have to have that ingenuity about it.
Right. You like you said, you can survive with something like your work ethic and all that and stuff in the ring, but your character is also very important because without a character, you're just some dude in the ring. You're just some dude doing work in the ring, and if you're just some dude, well, there's plenty of just some dudes out there. So it's kind of a catch-22 in this case because you have to have both, and some people just don't have that both.
Exactly. I mean, you had people like Karl Gotch who really couldn't make a name for himself in America, in the West in general, because his style was very straightforward. He was not a fan of gimmicks, was not a fan of characters. But then you took him over to Japan, where his style was his character, and he stood out.
Right.
But not everybody's going to be a Karl Gotch, obviously.
That is true. Not everybody can be a Karl Gotch. That is a true statement. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of in the same vein of thought that we're kind of working with here. Speaking of making a name for yourself, I feel like you kind of made a name for yourself in more than one way, of course. I was kind of curious about your persona. The name Akira obviously has some very. The only time I've ever heard the term Akira was from an anime. So, so in my mind at least, I'm thinking, okay, this might be some kind of Japanese twist to it. So tell us about what Akira is, that persona, and what the name means.
Well, the thing is, I am a mixed kid. I'm a mixed child. I am German, Korean, and Japanese. And I wanted to, when I was younger, I got picked on a lot for being Asian. I got all the names in the book that you can think of. And I got hit, picked on, whatever. And I really hated being me. I hated being Asian. I hated being different. And I grew to kind of despise it. But as time went on and I started to find the styles of wrestling and anime in general, the music, what have you, I found a kinship. I found something that I felt was personal to me because it was kind of my heritage in a sort. And when it came to defining who I was as a wrestler, I had numerous last names actually picked out to describe who I am. But I felt like to a Western audience, having a last name is kind of moot. Everybody has it. Everybody's just, I'm this person, and here's my catchphrase. And to me, I didn't want to be that kind of wrestler. I wanted to be someone where you just said the name, they're like, oh, I know who that is. Right. Whether it's Shibata, Akira, Kenta, Suzuki, just that one, Okada, where you don't really care for their first name, but you know that one name, and you're like, oh, crap, I know that. And Akira it felt personally because I grew up that movie, and honestly, I felt like it was basically my name that I never had. And I wanted to do it also in a way that stood out. And I didn't want to just be like, oh, this is Akira, just A, capital A, normal. I wanted to capitalize. I wanted it to be like that one thing where you look at it and you go, what the heck? That's a different name, especially in the West. And I just developed that character just by harnessing that anger, that savagery, that brutality that I had throughout high school. Because in high school, I was a kid that would only really get angry when someone stepped on me. And as time went on, I became bigger than a lot of the other kids, and they didn't like it anymore, so they stopped picking on me. So it's all that anger and all that angst and all that pride and want to be loved put into a character, put into me, and it's just amplified times a billion. Right. What you see out there is just me. Just I'm pushing it all out.
Right. You're just turned up to 11, basically.
Turned up to 1,000.
Turned up to 1,000. That's right. And obviously, that's. I guess when you have a name, like you said, you're just like, I don't need a last name. I just need the one name. I just need something that gives me kind of monikers to push me. And I feel like that's really creative, A. I mean, you're right, because the name Akira, obviously, the only reason I know that is because of that old movie from like 1998, that old anime movie. I remember that, and that obviously clicks to me. So I just remember that off the top of my head, and I'm probably gonna remember that for the rest of my life. No.
I mean that's the goal. That's what I want. I want people to watch me and want my life. Whether it was the story that I told in that ring, or whether it was just the fierceness in which I fight, I want people to come out and go, I'm a wrestling fan now, or that was the match that changed my perception of wrestling.
Absolutely. And God knows that we need some people to change their perception of wrestling. I kid. But, and it's amazing though. And, I actually really respect that. So fantastic. It's weird because you know how people have origin stories, like these comic book characters and these animes have origin stories. I love the Akira origin story, and I love that. So, fanboying aside, I guess kind of a question about a little more about you and kind of about that. I guess the more personal side of wrestling. When it comes to wrestling, like you said, you have to devote a lot of time to it. You have to devote a lot of time to training and honing your skills. And also you spend a lot of time traveling. I know that with wrestling, traveling is like the biggest thing because you go everywhere. And especially for you, you've been traveling everywhere, it seems like. I see your name pop up all over the place.
Trying my best to.
Right. Well, I just see your name pop up over the place. I have a lot of friends on Facebook who have they share posters and stuff from wrestling shows, and it says Akira. And when you travel, do you travel to shows with other people, or do you just travel by yourself to these shows? What is your travel life like?
I generally ride solo. Only recently I have a road companion in Charlie Cruel. Shout out to Charlie. But generally I'm by myself, but I imagine that is going to change over time. I've ridden with some people, but I've done the drives of over 200, 300 miles just by myself in the middle of the night.
Right. And I'm sure that gets a little rough driving so far, obviously.
I just go. I don't stop. Driven about 5-6 hours straight from like 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. and I only stop maybe one time just so I can get an energy drink.
Right.
I'm burning the candle at both ends.
Right, that's what I was going to say. When you get to that point, because I went on a trip to Montana, actually, and I drove 9 hours from Montana to Denver to fly out of Denver. And let me tell you, driving 9 hours straight like that, and I stopped obviously a couple times to use the bathroom, but man, it is intense because after a while, you kind of feel a little numb. You're just kind of just going on. You're just like, yeah, I'm driving. So
you drive on autopilot.
Exactly. Now that could get dangerous too because then you just zone out and you don't know where you are. But
well, see, that's when I get to the point. So that's when I get to the point where I'm either like screaming out music at the top of my lungs,
right,
just so I can like stay focused, or I'm listening to a podcast where it has my attention, and then I'm still mentally alert. Right. But I do occasionally like make those stops. I just stop, take a deep breath, look where I'm at, and just enjoy the ride. It's been a bit of a pain recently because I have been driving and wrestling with that pinched nerve in my back. So when I'm going for 4, 5, 6 hours, like my arm is just numb. It's misery, and I'm not a happy camper.
Right. You're like, yeah, that pinched nerve's acting up a little bit, and it's made me just a little grouchy.
Grams of Tylenol, suck it up, keep going.
Right, exactly. That's right. Can't stop, won't stop.
Nope.
That's an old phrase, isn't it? Can't stop, won't stop. No. So
can't stop, won't stop.
Right. So and then obviously with traveling, even though you travel by yourself, or even when you do travel with other people, I know a lot of people have those crazy or funny road stories. So do you have any kooky road stories that you have pretty good memory of, or anything like that you want to share?
I have 2 that are related, and they're related in the weirdest way. and then I had a near-death experience.
That would be
the first two was just, the first two was weird just because I've driven twice by two vehicles that is burning. There's nobody there. It's just the vehicle's on fire, and it's like it exploded. I'm just driving by like, what? I'll slow down and look back, and I'm on the interstate. I'm going, okay, and I'll just keep driving. And then the other time was I was driving to a show, and all of a sudden it started raining so hard that I could not see. And I slowed down to 30, and I was trying to keep the pace, and then I hit this obscure, deep part of the highway, and just a lot of water had just amassed, and I hit it, and I went from like 30 to like 50, and I peeled all the way around at a giant donut, and I had a giant semi that was like half a mile away from me. So I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, oh my God, I'm going to die. And eventually I just end up in the same lane. Oh, I kept driving.
You're just like, I about died, no big deal. I'm just going to keep on going.
I literally stopped in the middle of that highway and was like, what? And then I just like, I guess I better keep going. And I just went immediately. So it was God just playing a cruel prank on me.
Whew. Yikes! I've been in car accidents before, but good Lord, I couldn't imagine. It's raining, you can't see anything, and you just do a quick donut, and you're just like, yep, there's a semi right behind me. Let's just let's start praying though.
Like I went full Tokyo Drift, and no, that's not a race thing. But I went full Tokyo Drift, and my instincts kicked in, and I turned that wheel, and I just stopped, and I was like, oh, just kept going. But that's the nature of the game. That's right. The nature. There's nothing you can do. You can just go, well, that happened.
Right, that happened. Let's keep on going. Oh man. And I can just hear the music from Tokyo Drift, like the bell, like the ding, 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 ding. Just hear that right now. So I guess on a sort of a related note, kind of related to wrestling, you kind of traveled all over the place, and you've wrestled in a lot of places. But where is it that Akira currently wrestles frequently? Is there any place that you like to frequent in the most recent months?
I have recently taken up, I guess, refuge on Sundays at a place called Grindhouse Wrestling, Indiana. Wrestling with a lot of younger wrestlers, younger than I. And it's honestly kind of been a teaching experience because I'm rolling with these guys and I'm training with them, and it's giving me new perspective, but I'm also wrestling on a TV slot because that's how they fit. And so it's just this completely different style of wrestling because you have all these times going on, and I'm one of the guys that I've got to be in the know of where we're at, what we're doing, and you have to be good on your feet just to be able to cut out stuff, add stuff. We're supposed to be done, and it's just been a very surreal experience. And I've had my first legitimate feud down there. Who claims to be the top of the class, even though they're like a class of one. And I've been taking the boots to him, needless to say.
That's exciting, though.
But other than that, it's like a legitimate rival. I've had a few, but this is the first one where it's been every week. We've been head-to-head beating each other up. And he doesn't realize I'm a bit of a masochist as well as a sadist. So I just love the punishment. But other than that, getting into wrestling theology and fellowship, it's been also a merge. But I have really yet to find that promotion that I'm calling home as of yet. I have yet to find that promotion where I've found a bit of gold that comes with making a name for yourself. Despite being a wrestler's wrestler, Akira does want to have that just to bring legitimacy to that belt, because what is an athlete without goal? What is an athlete without, just like going to the Olympics, what is part of the Olympics without trying to get that gold?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, if you don't have a goal, and the Olympics is a good example, then why are you doing it? If you don't have a goal in mind, then what's the point, right? Excuse me. But kind of on. I mean, we've covered a lot. Obviously, we've kind of covered everything from who your favorite wrestler was when you were growing up, all the way to near-death experiences. But one thing we like to kind of ask when we kind of wind down an interview is we talk a lot about you in the ring, your persona in the ring, you traveling to the ring. But what is Akira like away from the ring? What is it that Akira does in his free time? Any hobbies, anything like that you do in free time?
Well, normally it's training, working on my catch wrestling, working on just training. Whether it's with friends, with my girlfriend, with just people in general. I also like to just sit back, watch a movie, drink tea, write. I like to draw, video games, though I really don't have time to play those much nowadays. Right. I like to edit videos. I like to film. Enjoy time with people, whether it's outside or whatnot. I enjoy nature. When I'm not wrestling, I try to keep, a low profile and just enjoy the time I have with whoever I'm around.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're traveling a lot and you're working a lot, I mean, keeping that low profile is probably a good change of pace, I'd say.
It's a change of pace, but it also makes me appreciate when I am in front of people, and when I do get my name called out, which is actually happened a couple times, especially in the Indianapolis area. I heard, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And it's a way to life. And I love both sides. If and when I do get to the point when I'm traveling all the time and people know me, I'd appreciate it. And if it got to the point where I don't have to wrestle a whole lot and I can just be a whole lot, I would appreciate that too.
Absolutely. And like you kind of said, it's just right now you gotta put that work into where you can get to that point, and eventually you'll be able to relax, right? Eventually we'll all be able to relax, right?
Exactly.
You know what they say,
we all hope.
You know what they say, sleep is for the dead. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I guess
I'm not dead yet.
Right, not dead yet. I'm kidding. So I guess honestly, kind of a personal question that I'm kind of curious about. You said a little bit you like video games and movies. I myself, I love movies as well. Curious, what's your favorite movie, or what kind of movie are you digging right now?
I like a variety of different styles, but the movies that are standing out to right now, a little bit of old, a little bit of new. Cowboy Bebop, just the TV series, Ghost in the Shell, the actual live action, and the old, just because I love the style. Akira, there's a bit of that science fiction-y fantasy element, but also that sense of realism. But when it comes to modern films, I'm infatuated with the John Wick about next year. Beautiful cinematography, beautiful coloring, beautiful effects, and just fantastic action that all is legitimate and not that Hollywood dramatization. I feel in the action.
Absolutely. Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. Love the John Wick movies. Super pumped for the third one. I'm super excited for that. But also, I'm actually myself. I remember watching Cowboy Bebop years ago when I was on Tsunami, and I have very vague memories of it. So I started watching it recently, and I forgot how aesthetic that series is. It's this weird like blues, jazz, space pirate, and it's
Oh, yeah.
amazing. I love the music. Like every time.
But there's 26 episodes, but it's all so real. It's like the beautiful thing about pro wrestling is that they're all very human stories in that show. Just like they're wrestling at its best is stories in the ring. No matter the fantastic, there's still a sense of real anybody can connect to. Just like in Cowboy Bebop, where they're fighting a mad clown, but that mad clown is legitimate killer, and they're all fearing for their lives, and everybody has a moment where they're fighting with everything that they have. And I can relate that to, say, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, where Shawn Michaels is just giving everything that he has, but this dead man is not going down. But, of course, well, spoiler alert for people that aren't aware, whereas they killed the clown, Shawn Michaels doesn't get that victory. But it's still that human struggle. That's what people can connect to.
Absolutely. And like you said, it portrays like that realistic, this happens in real life, and that's a really good thing that
If it happened to you, it could happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And another side note, also like Ghost in the Shell. Not really watched. I watched a little bit of the the actual anime, but I did watch the movie. It was Scarlett Johansson. There was a lot of controversy about that movie actually, which is, I guess, a story for another time. But yeah, it was a pretty good movie for the most part. I liked it.
Oh, I'm going to say this. People were saying all that stuff about Scarlett Johansson. Like, when all the Japanese people in the world don't care, you shouldn't care. When I, as an Asian minority, do not care and really enjoyed the movie for what it was, just a lot of people like outraged. It's a movie. Just like a lot of people want to get outraged over wrestling when it's like, dude, it's a sport. Chill out.
Right. That's true. You're right. It's ultimately, we're all going to go home at the end of the day. Nothing's going to have changed by you being outraged, so it's probably best just to cool it a little bit. That's what I always say.
Like that's like the level. Figure out, hey, everybody take a chill pill. Come on.
Right.
Not everything has to be a fight.
That's right. Not everything has to be a fight. And I think we all need to remember that. Just letting everybody out there know who's listening. Doesn't have to be a fight, guys. You can let it go. You can walk away with a keyboard, I promise. Anyways.
Well, some people just can't.
They can't. That's true. It's unfortunate, but hey, that's how they want to live their lives. You know what? You do you. Good.
You do you, man.
That's right.
How I live my life. You do you. Just don't affect me with your crap.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Keep you to you, and I'll keep me to me. But I suppose a little more on I guess the wrestling side of things. We talked a lot about different things, but I'm also curious because you seem pretty goal driven, you have very specific things you want to accomplish sometimes. But for the rest of 2018, and I suppose going into 2019, because I mean, Jesus, we're already in October, we're almost at the end of the year. But what are your goals from the rest of this year and moving into moving into 2019?
One, to continue training, continue figuring out who I am as a wrestler.
Right.
I want to be that burning star that nobody imagined would come out in less than a year. But I want to make a living out of this more than anybody else does. I want to train my hardest. I want to make this my life, and I want to step onto the more, not mainstream, but the more commercially viable routes. I want to step into like MLW. I want to step into these bigger promotions. I want to gnash my teeth and really sharpen my iron against other people's iron, because that's the only way I feel like I'm going to get better. I want to face these. I want to show that not only can I wrestle, not only weird personality that you can just observe on TV, but I'm someone that can legitimately entertain and legitimately speak to the audience with everything that I do. I want to step in the ring with people like Tom Lawler. I want to fight Brian Pillman Jr. I want to I want to be that one person that nobody expected would come up as fast as I can, and nobody expected to mark as quick as I could. That's my goal. Those are my aspirations. Eventually, into 2019, I hope I get picked up by a bigger promotion. I hope I'm going to work my butt off to eventually step into a Japanese ring and be like, here I am, American-made, but filled with Japanese heart and fighting spirit.
Right.
Show the world who Akira is.
Absolutely. And I would love to see that. I'm going to start the hashtag Akira for Japan. No, I'm kidding.
Do it.
Yeah, right. Do it. Start the hashtag. Anybody. Everywhere. Post it. So you can do hashtags on Facebook, I think, now. So you can do it on Facebook, too. But speaking
basically,
of... Go ahead.
Sorry, just 1 second.
No, you're good.
At the nature of me, I don't want to be someone's kid. I don't want to be someone who they can stick their name to me, because I didn't work my butt off by myself, for myself, just to have someone stick their name to me. I want someone to look at me as their coworker. I want someone to look at me as the patriot, the brothers in arms, rather than their kid. I want to prove that, yeah, I came from a no-name trainer. That no-name trainer made one of the best damn wrestlers in the Midwest, in the world, in the United States, wherever. Because I'm different, my style's different, and he ingrained in me that to be better than everybody else and to never settle. When I'm in that ring, I do not settle. I do not just, I'm going to phone it in today. I'm in that ring to win, whether you believe it or not. I am there to be as aggressive and as capable as possible, because that's who I am. I don't want to be someone's student or protege. I don't want to be someone who the name through their trainer or by their own family name. I am an independent wrestler. I am a wrestling Ronin at heart, and I'm Akira. That is me. Sorry, tangent. Oh.
You're good. You're good. Hey, that's what I'm all about on this show, is tangents. I'm pretty sure I need to have just a shirt that just says tangent on it, because I go off on this often. But
hashtag tangent.
Hashtag tangent, literally. But with that in mind, we want to spread you out there. We want you to be out there. We want everybody to see you. So I guess, like you said, you kind of like the whole marketing idea of this. So I'm sure you're going to have an answer to this next question. But do you have social media where fans can follow you and just kind of follow your career?
Oh, God, yes. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is hashtag, at the Akira way, because it's my way, not somebody else's way.
That's right.
And I want people to follow me on my journey, and I want people to be inspired by the fact that I'm doing it my own way. I'm doing it the way that I feel wrestling should be, not what's taught, but what I feel wrestling should be at. So yeah, at the Akira way, and yeah, I'm not going to go on Snapchat or anything, because I like some personal privacy.
No, that's okay. So you guys heard it. That's where you guys can go follow him. You can follow his path, follow the Akira way, quite literally, and you can kind of just check him out, see where he's going, see where he's going to be, because you're going to want to see him, definitely, I can promise you that. But Akira, I want to first of all thank you very much for coming on the show, talking to us. I mean, we've talked for an hour, and that's fantastic. We've gotten to learn so much about you, so much about your career, so much about your training, so much just about you as a person. And I definitely want to thank you for that. I definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your night to talk to me.
Oh no, I don't get to talk to people a whole lot other than my girl, and all we do is talk about wrestling. It's very different, and I appreciate that. And people that are listening to me and that do want to, just a little bit note about how I live my life, and people follow me, how I want people to live their lives. Live your life like a fighter. Don't be a faker. Don't be a dancer. Be real.
And we're back. back with Whatever Happened To, the segment where we catch up on some often overlooked names from Midwest Wrestling's past. I am Mike Isaacson. Today we're chatting with the American Kickboxer, aka Izzy High. And just to be upfront with our listeners out there, we do want to give a quick disclaimer. We don't know and never know what Izzy is going to say. So, the opinions in this interview are those of Izzy High and American Kickboxer alone. Don't necessarily reflect those of the show and its hosts. And just so you know, you've been warned. So, without further ado, how are we doing today, Izzy?
All right, as long as we've checked everybody's ID, we're really good today, man. I hope everybody's having a wonderful time. It's got to be 420 somewhere, so let's do this.
Rock on, rock on. Well, we're going to, like we said, this is a wrestling podcast, so first question for you today, Izzy, is tell us how you got started in wrestling.
Hey, what?
You're okay.
So, just so everybody knows, I get a little stage fright. Being seen as I'm being seen. Ha ha ha. So we're smoking a little blonde Lebanese hash here as we do this interview because I have memory problems, so we're trying to flash back just a little bit. So, anyhow, I was a lifelong wrestling fan. I seen my first match live in 1977 at Hera Arena in Dayton, Ohio, and the main event was the original Sheik versus Pampero Firpo. And to this day, I can tell you the finish of that match because they had built the storyline so well. Right. The storyline was that the Sheik was throwing fire to go into the finish, right? And the Sheik, as he was going to throw the fire, Firpo hit him with a bucket of water and schoolboyed him for the 1, 2, 3, and I was hooked. That was it. I knew at the age of 5 that I wanted to be a pro wrestler. There's 2 things that I really wanted to do in life, and that was to be a pro wrestler and a musician. And I've been truly blessed enough to live both of those lives.
Absolutely.
So that's how I got into wanting to become a pro wrestler. And my training was actually through Les Thatcher, Bull Payne, Rip Rogers, and Tracy Smothers. So those were the guys who took the time to teach me the business correctly, the traditions, and things like that. And truly blessed to be able to say that those were the guys who took the time to show me the right way. Because the business was very different back then.
Right.
A lot different. It wasn't as easy to get into the business in 1990 as it is now. Especially for a guy under 200 pounds.
Right. And, they liked those big guys back in the day.
And it's still the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Really and truly.
And, definitely that's a good way to get started. You were a lifelong fan, but also you had that passion, and you also had some pretty good, starter-ups there. You had, like people like Tracy Smothers and Rip Rogers, who obviously are fantastic, talents, and, they definitely know the business. So that was a pretty, I would say, a good introduction into the business.
Well, what most people don't understand, and they if you don't know, I was involved with 3 different WWE developmental territories as they were coming in, okay?
Right.
So, like as I teach my students, the things that I teach my students are still the same things that are used in the Performance Center to this day. And I've had some of my students still explain that to me, that the way I teach is exactly the same stuff that they do there. So it's, it's the same groundwork's being done.
Right.
Les Thatcher with HWA was the very first developmental territory for WWE. And then Rip Rogers with OVW.
Right.
And KAW in Memphis, Tennessee. So I was there for 3 of the developmental territories, but yeah.
Absolutely. And then obviously, I feel like a lot of people are pretty familiar with like the OVW. The other 2, I know I'm familiar with those, but for people obviously who don't. But obviously, yeah, I mean, those are the 3, like you said, those are some of the developmental territories that probably spawned some of the biggest talents, even that are still working today, even. So,
well, not only that, but HWA's roots was the expansion of Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
right.
Les Thatcher started teaching in the Cincinnati area just as an expansion of Jim Clarnet's Smoky Mountain, because they started running shows in Erlanger, Kentucky. Okay, here's a fun story. This guy who was supposedly training us, he's a fucking con artist, and I won't even say his name. And but anyhow, to build up to Thatcher coming in, he was promising all the boys that they were going to have jobs with Smoky Mountain as soon as his best friend Les Thatcher came in.
Right.
And the day that Thatcher showed up, he said right in front of the boys to this guy, "You're nothing but a fucking con man, a liar, and a thief, and you're taking these boys' money. You need to get the fuck out of here." And Les Thatcher threw this guy out of his own gym. So that's how Les Thatcher became the trainer of Heartland Wrestling. So,
good Lord. So he didn't mess around. He just came in and was like, "Look, you ain't gonna be taking them for no fools."
yeah, I told you it was a whole different business, man. And I wish it was still the same to that degree.
Right.
I do, because you really truly had to earn it.
Absolutely. And I think something that a lot of people do now is that they kind of just, they can just jump into the business, and I guess anybody can be a pro wrestler. Not everybody should be, but pretty much anybody can.
Well, fuck, if you got a pair of high-tech boots and a friend with a ring, you can start a promotion.
Right. That's the unfortunate truth.
At Outbox.com, and back in the day, there was like one fucking place that made your wrestling gear out of it. It was called K&H. You had one place where you bought your boots. It was called J-Mar. And it was different.
Absolutely. And it's probably not. It was probably different for the better in this case. Unfortunately, it has changed. But
well, but guys wonder why the business in a lot of places don't draw.
Right.
It's because they pissed in their own water stream, man. Once you've tainted that stream so long, it's got to flush itself out. Right. And if you've seen bad indie wrestling in a town, after you've seen it, well, this town's dead for at least a year.
Right.
This is what people are going to remember.
It's like that old saying, pee downstream, right?
Right, sure.
But so I guess kind of along the lines of what we're talking about, we've talked a little bit about your training and your upbringing. Now, obviously, you talked a little bit also about the way the business was back then. But I'm kind of curious, because obviously you've trained in some of the best training schools, like the developmentals, as you had mentioned, and then and you worked in those territories. But what were some other places that you worked frequently? Some perhaps other places that you may have been able to call home at the time?
To be honest with you, I've completely traveled around the country all the time.
Right. For
close to 20 years. So once a week, a lot of times in different towns, you know what I mean? One night stands. It'd be like Evansville, Indiana, every Wednesday night, or Louisville, Kentucky, on a Tuesday or Thursday, or Memphis, Tennessee. It all depends on what era we're discussing, you know what I mean? Because my job was to be a wrestler, and the only way that you made money at this on the independent level was you stayed on the road all the time. So I didn't exactly have a home promotion.
Right.
Tarek and I, had created a feud because there was no lighter weight wrestlers in the country. There was a guy in Indiana by the name of Troy Miller, but Troy didn't want to be on the road like that. But Tarek did. And because of this, we had became an attraction because we did a presentation of kind of a hybrid of lucha libre and the Japanese strong style in America before it was, before it had been seen.
Right. You were kind of innovating that sort of style for people who had not, like you said, not seen it quite yet.
Yeah, there were times that, like, we'd do a match in, let's say, Georgetown, Kentucky on a Sunday night, all right? And those fans were so used to the traditional Memphis-style wrestling that when Tarek and I did Lucha Libre, we kind of lost them at the pass. It took a while for them to catch up to what the hell we were doing. We'd catch complete silence, and after about 3 to 5 seconds of silence of what the fuck did we just see, then we'd get, like, the clap. And, not the clap, that sounded really fucking hot. But, we'd get the like a golf appreciation, getting a Japanese response in Georgetown, Kentucky. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, I got you.
Right.
Getting over the clap. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. I got shots for that, eh? Yeah.
So, kind of, that's good stuff though, because like you said, you were kind of innovating that style. You were more of a commodity because you were different than what the current product was at the time.
Well, let me the other thing that was different. Okay,
right.
Tarek and I created our own belt that was called the IICW Lucha Libre Championship. Okay, and IICW might as well meant the Imaginary Championship Wrestling. Okay, but when anybody asked, it was International Independent Championship Wrestling because we were taking that title all around the nation. So every match that we had was a title match.
Right. And that obviously a title match is a little more illustrious than just like a normal like mid-card match, for instance.
Yeah, and it makes it an attraction.
Right.
So we could build storyline off of that. So instead of going to a town and doing one match as a blow-off, instead we can run a storyline of, and this is where guys get lost with winning and losing. I worked with Tarek 156 times in 1 year, okay?
Right.
And you can count on one hand how many times I went over in that 156 matches, all right? Because if I go over, what's the attraction? Where's the chase?
Right.
Right?
There's no end goal in that case. You're always on top, so there's no build to that. It's just you winning.
Right, and so I start from the underneath, and then try to stretch it out as much as possible. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're kind of making it to where instead of it just being a one-hit wonder, hey, I won, you're kind of making it to where, oh, it's an uphill battle, and this uphill battle is going to take as long as it needs to take.
or blowing your whole wad in the first match.
Right.
and the story, right?
Right.
Because when if you're watching a porn, okay, when does the porn end?
At the climax.
Yeah, the minute you blow your wad, the porn's over with. So, and then you have to, again, rebuild, wait, rebuild, have a cigarette, get you a couple drinks, and then you're ready to go again.
Right.
And wrestling is that same way, and that's where they've gotten so lost with booking and everything else. Because the first match now has 50 fucking high spots. They're punching each other in the face. And, you know, what have they left? Okay, you guys have done everything in the fucking world.
Right.
Great.
Only thing you haven't done is died in the ring, basically.
Sure, that's the first match. So now what does the crowd have to do? The crowd's blood their wad.
Right.
So now you've got to fucking give them how much time to get it back together, draw their interest back in, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. So, and storyline-wise, like, for example, the first match is the settle-in match. All right?
Right.
Get everybody settling in. We've got your attention now. You've got your soda. You got your popcorn. These guys stay in the ring. They don't punch each other. Why don't they punch each other? Because we got a feud that's got heat that later on in this show, they're actually going to punch each other for a reason.
Right.
It's something as simple as throwing a punch. Yeah.
And that's... Or go ahead.
Yeah, or the example of how they've lost touch with reality so bad is the current product of WWE, okay?
Right.
And this is the simplest thing that you probably never even thought of, but would make you question reality to begin with. You have a guy with a national background in wrestling. What's his name? What's the kid's name? Bobby Lashley.
Right.
Okay. Now, Bobby Lashley goes to the ring in an athletic competition. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear.
Okay. And in this athletic competition of a simulated fight, this bald man is wearing a headband. And at the end of the match, he's still wearing a headband. A bald man.
Right.
So your headlock, any type of offense that you've done towards a bald man's head wasn't strong enough to knock a headband off of his head.
You know, I never would have thought about that. I never would have considered that as kind of like I guess you could say a medium or a ruler for how intense the match is, right?
Right? Never thought about that. Oh,
nope, never thought about that.
Something that simple. Right? If you were to see a street fight, do you think that a guy could wear a fucking cowboy hat for a street fight? How about a bald man with a headband?
I was gonna say I don't think that hat's gonna stay on too long.
Yeah. Or a bald man with a headband.
Bald man with a headband, right? That's right.
Okay. And I'm the crazy one, so 3 kids in a bucket. And they wonder why they lose ratings.
Right. Oh, man. So, I guess kind of the next thing, too, and speaking of crazy things, we've talked a little bit about your training, your upbringing, kind of your passion for wrestling at the time there, and kind of how it built up to you eventually getting trained and doing that. We also talked a little bit about the intricacies of wrestling, but something I'm also curious about is you obviously your I guess you say the demeanor, the moniker of the American Kickboxer. How did that come to be?
American Kickboxer, I was a martial artist. I started in martial arts at the age of 5 in Taekwondo. Right. I did Greco-Roman and freestyle wrestling as well, AAU-style wrestling in junior high. And in the state of Ohio, in my weight class, I was the #1 wrestler in the state for a year. Then stuck in martial arts, was doing competitions, got into with doing competitions, a lot of doors were open for me to other dojos. And other instructors had given me a welcome mat to come train in their dojo. And I was somewhat of a street kid. I've been on my own since I was 14 years old. And that's legit. I slept in gas station bathrooms to get out of the cold if I couldn't sleep in the dojo. But irregardless, I got into Muay Thai kickboxing and doing kickboxing competition. And when the time came to pick a name, I wanted something that was reflective of who I was. And for those that don't know, this is the second time that we've done this interview. So I'm trying to tie together the things that I think were kind of important as well. So the name itself, we had discussed before that my sensei, Les Thatcher, had asked me why I thought I could get over in the business with my size, because as I said, it was unheard of at the time. And I asked him, I said, who was the biggest action star of the 70s?
Right.
And he got puzzled for a minute, and I said, Bruce Lee. And I said, nobody ever doubted when they walked out of the theater after watching Bruce Lee. Nobody ever said, oh, that shit was fake.
Right.
And I always had that. So if I walked to the ring and people made fun of my size, the minute that the ring announcer said, American Kickboxer, now it's interesting. Now there's an unknown variable, the martial arts, that has now been added to this presentation.
Right. It's that extra layer of, this guy could probably, kick my ass.
And way back when, before UFC, I was invited to legitimately fight in a promotion called Pancrase in Japan. So I had a legitimate background.
Absolutely.
And, right.
So you kind of went from that kickboxer gimmick, which was like this, it's badass. Like, you had that reputation and you had that real life skill to back you up. And then eventually you progressed into a different persona, which was Izzy High. Now, like you said, we've done this interview before, so I know where Izzy High came from. But I got to tell you, this is one of my favorite origin stories of all time. But tell us about where that came from, the persona of Izzy High.
Okay, man. The original idea came from a discussion with being on the road with Derek. If we could do another gimmick, what would it be? And American Kickboxer is so rigid, so disciplined and whatnot. I wanted to do something fun that wouldn't, that I could really play with and enjoy, could be a play of words and everything. So I said I wanted to do something where everything was referenced back to marijuana.
Right.
And when I got down to Memphis, Tennessee, and was working in Memphis, the promoter said that the American Kickboxer gimmick was a little plain. They wanted something more flash and whatnot. And he wanted me originally to do a redneck gimmick, and I knew with the way that I talked the minute that I was to cut a promo and not use the southern accent, kind of like you remember when Kofi Kingston mysteriously lost the Jamaican accent, right?
Yeah, but I remember that.
Quote. So the minute that he forgot to use that accent, it shot that gimmick in the head.
Right.
I didn't, and it killed the shelf life of it. Now, for me, I wanted to be able to completely switch the gimmick around. So we did something. Do you remember the Flintstones? Do you watch the Flintstones?
I absolutely have. I used to love the Flintstones.
Dude, so when Fred Flintstone used to get hit in the head, his persona would change, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, he became Freddie Flintrock or something along those lines, where he was the romantic debonair and whatnot. So what I did was I took a bump from the top rope head first through a table on the floor. And did the gimmick where I'm coming back to. And as I'm coming back to, the ring announcer is in the ring, and he's saying on the microphone, well, not really on the microphone, he's saying it loud enough where the microphone's close to it, and the microphone's picking it up. Okay? And he says, what's wrong with this guy? Is he crazy? Is he nuts? And after he said, is he nuts? I said, what's my name? And he said, Izzy High. And that's where Izzy High came.
That's a great. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The only name that is a question. And from there, we added into the team of Weed, Wrestling's Extreme Execution Daredevils. Myself and Dr. Bud Ganja, who's got a PhD in THC and a minor degree in herpetology. And our other tag partner, Motley Garcia. So we formed that group called Weed. And it was really cool because I'll name drop here for a second. My boy Jamie Dundee. Jamie, the first time that he had ever seen our name on a flyer, he walked into the dressing room and was like, oh God, Wolfie, you ain't gonna believe this shit. This team's called fucking Weed. I'll be goddamn, they're called Weed. That's gotta be the coolest fucking thing ever. And yeah, that was Jamie's response. So I knew with that response from Jamie that the gimmick was gonna get over.
Right. You're just like, we're golden now. We're good to go.
Yeah, right. If I can get that response from Jamie Dundee, but by God, we're gonna do good with this.
Oh gosh, and that's the thing that cracks me up too is that like I said, I've heard of so many different ways that they've created characters and how people came up with their names, but never in my life have I ever heard a better origin story for a wrestling gimmick than the Weed and the Izzy High origin story, if you will. That's fantastic. So
I was lucky because part of my deal as well going down there was I helped write weekly television. So
right.
I had the freedom of doing these different things.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I remember we kind of talked about this when we talked last as well, but, especially in that era, I know that the whole concept of marijuana was a little more touchy than it is now.
Right.
So it was definitely a little more, tongue-in-cheek at the time, I think.
Well, the thing of it is I'm going to be who I'm going to be regardless. Right. And I'm not the first guy to do it. I'm just the one who admitted it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And everybody, and here's the funny thing with this is when I admitted this and I'm doing this gimmick, people look down at their noses at me and whatnot. But how many people are dropping dead left and right over pills and everything else? Hey, I told you up front what the fuck I do. I'm still waiting for an overdose.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Fucking peanuts have killed more people than pot.
Right.
You can still buy Peter Pan on the fucking shelf.
Sure can. You sure can. That's a fact, and you can't really argue statistics, can you?
No, I prefer to use math. Yeah, that's if you've seen different people go on the pathway, and I'm going to shift off. We had discussed this before in the last interview,
right?
That all these wrestlers who use these different outs and excuses. We had discussed that. Nowhere in a contract did it say that you had to fucking chase hookers or fucking do cocaine all night. It
right.
doesn't say that. That's personal choice. And blaming Vince McMahon or blaming WWE or any of those places for your personal fucking choice and your personal time is bullshit.
Absolutely, it is. It's something people don't want to hear, but it is because ultimately, you are in control of what you do. Nobody else.
I say this, and I'm blackballed by the company. They're not even allowed. My students who work there and still work there are not even allowed to mention my name. But 2 tears in a bucket. Fuck it.
Right. That's right.
Heartbroken by it.
So I mean, so we've talked about quite a bit. So so I guess kind of reroute us just a little bit. We talked a lot about different places you've worked, all your different personas so far, and some of your memories of the business. And you've told us quite a few good, funny stories and all that good jazz. So some of the places you worked, obviously, we talked about a couple different places, but you were very well known, obviously, in the late 90s, early 2000s as one of the guys in Midwest Wrestling. And with wrestling, how it is now, because you seem pretty familiar with how wrestling is nowadays, what was the scene like then compared to now? What are some of the differences that you think really make a difference in this case? Obviously, other than the whole high-flying thing, the multiple spots in a match, right?
Back then, a lot of promotions were ran by fucking greasy pedophiles, and now it's ran by fanboys. So
that's some kind of an improvement, right?
Yeah, right. So weird enough, but
weirdly enough, this is a good thing.
yeah. I've watched the progression, and I wish the business itself would go backwards a little bit, and sadly, I helped make that progression happen with the way that I wrestled.
Right.
But I think the next evolution of wrestling needs to be something more of the UFC base. I've said that for a long time. I think that an actual Pancrase style promotion or UWFI promotion, where it looked like a shoot match,
right,
could actually get over. But nobody understands that presentation because wrestling is not important anymore in wrestling. So, now I'm sounding like that bitter old man. Back in my day.
That's right. Back in my day, the television was in black and white. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's what Smothers used to hit me with that joke. But no, that's the other thing with older wrestlers. They sold out every fucking building. They were always on top, and if I can put out a message in this or a few anyways. There's a price for everything in this world, and if you dream big, there's a big price to be paid. And to this day, I deal with a seizure condition due to concussions. I'm legally not able to drive a vehicle because of it. So understand, kids, there's only so many bumps on that bump card that you get when you get started. And once every bump that you take just a little notch out of that bump card. And it's said that every bump that you take in the business, the physical toll is between a 15 and a 35 mile per hour car crash on the body.
Right.
Okay. So, and understanding that, and understanding the bump card and how many shots that you have at it, then be a little bit more selective because, as I said, there's a price to be paid.
No, absolutely. And kind of like you even mentioned earlier in the interview is that, nowadays the things kind of move quickly in the ring. You see these, you're 2 minutes into the match and you've already seen 2 spots. You know what I mean? You've already seen these 2 big, moves that kind of devolve the progression of the match. And that also kind of ties into the, you're just taking all these bumps and you're slowly but surely putting away that career because it's just going to happen eventually.
I think about the attention span now like an episode of The Family Guy.
Right.
Where you have how many different cutaway scenes in this show just to try to keep your attention. to draw you back to, yeah, does it make sense?
Right. Now, I like Family Guy. Don't mind. I would say that I like Family Guy, but you're right, because a lot of people, when you watch that, there are these cutaways, these flashbacks, or these side tangents that they go on, trying to, I guess, draw more people in, make it more interesting in a way,
and create more time.
Right.
Filler. Well.
That's right. And that's kind of what they're doing now. They're you have Raw that's 4 hours long, and these matches got to last.
Shit, what's worse is fucking indie shows that go 4 hours fucking long.
For real.
Holy shit. How long's Raw now? Is it 2 hours?
It's like 3 or 4 hours, I thought. It's ridiculous how long it is. It's more than 2 hours, though, I'm pretty sure.
And that's with the production that they have, with the video production and everything else.
Right.
But these indie shows go 4 fucking hours. Oh my god. Oh, so we can't go.
Well, because people are falling asleep during your show.
Fuck yeah.
So if an indie show is that packed and their card was that long, I don't know if I would want to go, because I'm cool with longish shows, but when you have an indie show, like you said, you don't have that level of production that the WWE has. There's nothing to keep my attention. I'm just going to be bored.
And if you do go, you're not going to go back for at least another year.
Right. I have to build myself back up.
Well,
to be able to go back.
You've had enough. I'm full. I cannot eat another fucking bite. If I see that food again, I swear I'm gonna fucking puke.
Right.
And we've all had that one liquor that we can never drink anymore. What is it for you?
I'm trying to think.
What is it for you? Come on.
Probably like a mint or peppermint schnapps.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's another good one. Yep. I can't even eat candy canes because of those, man. Can't even eat a candy cane. The fucking cheap ass schnapps.
Right, that's right. It has kind of like that little bit of a tang of almost like paint thinner a little bit.
Oh yeah. You're drinking quality shit right there when it's got that. Fucking A, right?
Oh man, that's a true story though. True story though. I can do some mint, but sometimes I'll smell mint and I'll be like, yep, nope, not today.
Right. Yeah, I can't even smell fucking tequila. Oh.
You're like, keep that Jose Cuervo over there.
Well, I don't drink at all anyways. I'm the type of person I could have one drink, one beer, and I'd have a hangover the next day. So I don't even drink at all.
That's probably for the best then, right?
Yeah, right?
You're just like, yeah, I don't want to wake up tomorrow with a headache.
Oh, yeah. I have enough of those to begin with. So
that's right.
Wait.
You're like, I don't need to make it any worse.
Right. Well, the positive thing is as my memory goes, I'll never see another rerun.
Right.
All right.
Never see another rerun. That's right. Oh gosh. So we've covered quite a bit. So for people who are listening, we've gone from talking about how you got started in wrestling to liquor that you smell and makes you kind of want to die just a little bit.
Hey, let's interview up a little bit from the last one. All right.
I would say it's pretty close, just as quirky, I guess you could say.
The hash that I've got here is a lot better than what we had the other night. So anyway,
better inebriant, better interview.
Inebriated? No, we're just warming up, young man. To learn. You got to train to hang out with me. We're warming up.
We're warming up, he says. Oh my. So I guess another kind of tangent to go on, a little more of another path to walk down. So obviously we've talked a lot about your career in wrestling, what you did in wrestling, who you worked with and all, and where you went. But tell us what you're up to now. What is it that you did after wrestling? You know, a lot of people do different things, but what is it that you're up to nowadays?
Well, what happened for me was as I said, with concussions, I started to develop seizures. And it was kind of like a calling for me. And what that was I was blessed enough to understand, that I still had the spotlight on me. Okay?
Right.
And I've been blessed enough to have that spotlight. And while you've got the spotlight, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to say? What are you going to do? And the last thing that I wanted to be known as was somebody who was just good at taking bumps or who was just a good wrestler. And I lived such a blessed life, and I've got to see so much of this country on somebody else's dime and performance-wise. And pro wrestling is so much of a training field for just about anything else that you want to do in the entertainment industry.
Right.
And that's where guys get so lost once it's done for them in wrestling, and it's fucking sad, man. I have watched so many guys fucking die. I got started in 1990 in wrestling, and you can't count how many guys I've watched die in this business just because they didn't get it.
Right.
They didn't understand. And so, while having the spotlight, I thought, why not try to do something positive? Why not use my life story and these life's experiences to try to tell somebody else, hey, if you walk down this path, if I walk down a path in the middle of the night and there's a hole in this pathway and I step in it and I break my leg, what kind of friend am I if I don't tell you, hey, if you walk down that path, you might step in a hole over here, man. You might want to watch out for holes.
Right.
You know, what kind of person would I be if I wouldn't tell you that because I've already lived it myself? I don't want to see anybody else get hurt.
Right. You kind of want you're kind of like, I want you to learn from what I did so that you don't have to experience it.
Sure. So I try to use music and comedy to do that. I don't like the term stand-up comedian. I prefer to think of myself as an entertainer.
Right.
But if you come into my show and you think you're going to see Cheech and Chong, cool. You bought the ticket. Now take the ride.
Right.
I can take you on whatever ride I want to take you on. Now you bought the ticket. You've sat down. Let's see where I take this. And a lot of times, I don't even know where I'm going to go. Well, it's the truth. That's how art's truly created. I have some kind of guidelines and outlines that I might want to talk about, but then I try to flow. And it's kind of call it in the ring a little bit, but I can also call spot for spot as well.
Right.
So, like, for example, if you go on YouTube and you look up Izzy High Pop Art 13, you'll be able to hear some of my studio work and a bit of my message through there. And I just try to get people to think, because I think so much bullshit goes on in this world that if people would have taken a moment to think, that it would know there's no way it should happen. I'll give you a silly example.
Right.
All right. A silly example is people are charged fines for not wearing seatbelts in their car.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Who the fuck accepted that bullshit? Okay, you pay for your car, correct?
Right. Yep. You pay for your car.
As well as your insurance.
That's right. Every month.
So, if you don't wear a seatbelt and get into a fucking wreck, who gets hurt?
Just you.
Fucking A, it's personal choice. That's all that it is. It's personal choice.
That's right.
And you're going to be fined, possibly jailed, if you don't pay that fine for your own fucking personal choice? How the fuck did that happen?
Yep, I'm a very firm believer in that that same concept. My fiance doesn't much care for it, but I say, look, I'm going to wear a seatbelt because I want to, but like I shouldn't be penalized if I don't wear a seatbelt by chance.
Oh, let's look at the stupidity of things. We'll take another quick glance.
Right.
I had a woman one time, I was standing outside having a cigarette, and she said to me, "Oh, God, you smoke?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I don't drive." She said, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "I don't drive." She said, "What?" I said, "I'll tell you what. You pull your car into that garage and close the door, and I'll walk over into that garage and light a cigarette and close the door. And we'll see which one of us comes walking out." Right?
Right. Yep, they're not gonna be walking out of there with too much of that carbon monoxide.
Well, but you don't hear anybody standing around bitching about that now, do you?
No, because it's not to them. That's not their problem. Apparently, everybody's got to have that high horse, right, where they jump on and say, "Oh, you shouldn't be smoking."
Right. But if it was truly about the air and it was truly about what they're fucking breathing, right?
You wouldn't be driving if that was the case.
Sure. Or you would have fucking asked for a different source. You know, it's out there. It's just there's big oil companies that shit costs money to. You know, pedophile ring, shit like that. But anyhow.
So I mean, and also I think something you also had mentioned last time we had had a conversation at our point to talk. You'd mentioned that you also are writing scripts and for TV shows and movies. Is that right?
Yeah, that's and people, you're gonna have to pardon me if this is not the typical wrestling interview. I am so disgusted with listening to guys sit and blow themselves in interviews. Okay, it's not what you're going to hear from me. The next part, I think that if you put, and I use the word think because thoughts are easier to change than beliefs. Okay, so I use the word think a lot.
Right.
But dreams are possible in this world, and I'm blessed enough to have started out as a 14-year-old homeless kid, and I've lived just about every dream I've had because I was willing to go after it. So I've had different ideas and thoughts, and I've written television for wrestling and helped produce television for wrestling and storylines and ideas. So the next step or the next progression was writing for television shows and concepts and movie scripts. And that's what I'm working on now. And I use the stand-up comedy as a vehicle to try to line up meetings to sell these different scripts, because the minute that I sell these scripts, I truly plan on disappearing completely. I'm not looking for fame. Fame is so fading, and I wish people would understand that, because people build up people only to tear them down and destroy them. They take great pride in destroying people. I don't want to be famous. I want to make my money and fucking disappear. So, so as I said, I've been writing. I've written an adult animated series. I've also been working on. I've written a movie script as well as a couple television show outlines for a few different television shows as well.
Right.
And right now I'm just trying to set up meetings and pitch meetings to sell them and completely disappear.
Right. Yeah, and that's something we also had talked about. You're like, I want to disappear from the social media, go off the grid, that whole deal. Which we talked about.
Well, what it is we had discussed before. People forget simple lessons that were given to them as children. You you are what you eat, but I prefer to think of it as you are what you consume.
Right.
And all the time, people are just consuming anger and hatred and murder and rape and all this stuff. And they take it in repeatedly over and over and over again, and they feed off of this. And when you feed off of this, there has to be a byproduct that comes from it. If you eat, you take a shit. You put something out. So if you consume this, what did you end up putting out? And I don't... Yeah. People all the time, they want to talk. They talk about, well, we need to think outside of the box here. And my thought is why don't you just get out of the fucking box?
Right. You're like, why are you...
Think outside of the box, just get out of the fucking box. Yeah, all the time now. And we'll go into this. I am truly a juggalo. I am the gypsy crew of juggalos. So anybody that comes out to the gathering of the juggalos, look for the gypsy crew. You can find me there. But what we're dealing with is the idiocy of something. And what I mean by this is, as a juggalo, the FBI lists juggalos as a gang.
Right.
And the juggalos are listed as an organized gang. But the Catholic Church is not. The Catholic Church itself has admitted to being a child pedophile ring. They've admitted this. Okay, but they're given tax exemption. They don't even have to pay taxes. When somebody in that church gets caught raping children, they get moved to another church so they can rape more children. If there was ever a place to instill the RICO Act, which is an act that was created for organized crime, it would be the Catholic Church.
Right.
But instead, the juggalos are listed as a gang. And in all reality, it's, again, this is one of those things that it doesn't matter to anybody else because it's just the juggalos, yeah, a bunch of fucking street kids or the kids that nobody thinks about. But what if it's you? You know, what if it's something that you like? You know, it's all right if it happens to people that you don't think anything about. That our freedoms are being taken away. That people have lost their kids. People have lost their jobs in the military,
right?
Because of a juggalo tattoo. People have lost their kids over this shit, and yet the Catholic Church runs free to rape our children.
Right. No.
So, again, as I said, if we want to think about things and how they truly matter, and if it's all about, you know, that's the biggest cry when we go to war with other countries. What about the children? What's happening with the children? But you've got the Catholic Church out on the street. What about the children?
Right.
You welcome that with open arms.
It's kind of a weird double standard in a way, if you will.
Sure. And I don't know how it's become acceptable. So I stand with the juggalos. I stand with the family, and it's if it can happen to us, it can happen to anybody.
That's true.
And the thing of it is nobody thinks about that. All your messages, or our own government, they tell you all of your messages are seen and sent around, and nobody thinks about that. You know?
Right.
I'm like, fuck, man, I'll send out dick pics, man, just so the fucking government can get a good look, man. I figure they've been fucking us this long, the least they can do is look at my dick, right? So.
That's an interesting point.
Oh,
my. So, that was a wild ride, and I guess to kind of corroborate on you there, I definitely agree that the whole thing with them claiming the Juggalos are, this organized crime, whether or not. Go ahead.
Here's your fucking gang speech for you, all right? And I'll tell you why it's so fucking dangerous. Because I live my life by a simple theory, and it's one that I've created myself, all right? And what it's called is the Deadly Six. And what the Deadly Six is any time that you find somebody that's not happy with where they're at in life, they'll always revert back to one of six things. Those six things being coulda, woulda, shoulda, guilt, sin, and blame. All right?
Right.
Now, you're talking to somebody who's literally lived every dream that he has and continues to live his dreams. And I'm telling people how they can do that themselves. Right?
Right.
Boy, that makes me a pretty dangerous fucking person now, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. But by living this way and understanding the Deadly Six being coulda, woulda, shoulda, guilt, sin, and blame, two things have happened. Number one, nobody can bullshit me, okay?
Right.
Because the minute that I hear it, I see it, I'm like, you're not holding yourself accountable. But more importantly, when I hear it and I see it come from myself, it means that I have to hold myself accountable. And that, my friend, is how you accomplish your goals and your dreams. You write them down. You fucking put together a plan. Most people don't treat their lives with the same respect they treat their car.
Right.
All right? Does that make sense?
Right. I mean, you literally, with your car, I guess to kind of elaborate, you literally insure your car. You do all this stuff to take care of it, but with your life, you just kind of toss it away.
Not only that, with your car, we're talking about two things that you cannot get back: time and energy.
Right.
All right. Once it's given, it is gone. Okay. You never get into your car without knowing where you're going, how much gas it's going to cost, and the route that you're going to get there. How many people treat their lives with that same direction?
Not enough.
And that's all I try to do. I try to use the two things that I can never get back to their fullest potential. That's my time and my energy. So I don't have time for a lot of the bullshit that's going on. The NFL, that shit doesn't mean a fucking thing, man. It doesn't mean anything in this world. It's give 'em cake and Coliseum. Keep 'em fat and stupid. Yeah. And I try to look past all that stuff, man. And I try to focus on what truly matters in this life and in this world to me. And I try to focus that time and that energy towards those things. And I try to teach and show everybody that if a guy like me, a former homeless kid, can do this, then anybody can, man. There's nothing special about me. I'm just willing to take risks. And if you're willing, go out there and truly risk it. People are going to point. People are going to make fun of you because they don't have the drive, the determination that you do. Yeah, they don't have goals. Right. And that's when you have to just keep focused and keep going yourself.
Right.
Because the true art, the evolution of Izzy High is most people are trying to create art. And I'm truly trying to become art. And art is truly subjective. Does that make sense?
Right. You're trying to create yourself instead of trying to be the creator. You're trying to become a created, I guess you could say. And you're, like you said, it's subjective, so it's just kind of how you see it in that way.
All art is subjective.
Right.
All true art is subjective. Some people see graffiti as something beautiful. Others see graffiti as, it's fucking trash. Same with pro wrestling.
Right.
It's art. It's subjective. And in truly understanding that, life can be that same way.
Life is subjective, is what you're saying.
Well, people's views completely on you are subjective, and as long as you don't give a fuck what it is, you truly understand it's art, that you can be that art.
I got you. Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. It doesn't matter what other people are saying as long as you're being the true you in this case.
Of course, you are what you create. We are only every day that we're here. If you're living in the past, you can't drive forward looking in a rear view mirror. You know, life's like a bicycle is what Einstein said. He said the only way it stays balanced is if you're moving forward.
Right.
You know, that guy Einstein, he might have been a smart guy. I've heard a few rumors, but
right. He just helped theorize atomic bombs and stuff of that nature, and was kind of a genius. But yeah, no, I'm kidding.
But the thing I realized with wrestling is I had developed the ability to speak in front of people. Most people in their everyday life would absolutely fear public speaking.
Right.
As a wrestler, I was handed a microphone every night and depended on people chanting my name when I left.
Right.
So, so to kind of wrap this up, man, and my idea, Gandhi said, "Be the change that you want to see it." And John Lennon was asked when he was a kid, they said, "John, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And he said, "Happy." And they said, "John, you don't understand the question." He said, "No, you don't understand the answer."
Right.
Right?
Right. And that's a good quote. I've heard that quote before. I really do like that quote.
That's it, man. That's it. And I guess to wrap this up a little bit, the way that I always wrap up my shows, and it's kind of my message, is it was a message that was delivered by Bill Hicks, and I think it still truly rings true, especially in the times that we live in today. And Bill passed away of pancreatic cancer, but I think his message is so important, and I'll share this and then we'll wrap this up.
You're good.
And his message was, the world is just a ride in an amusement park. And we choose to go on this ride. It's full of thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. And some people have been on the ride for a very long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And others have come back to us and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid. This is just a ride. And we kill those people. Get them up. We've got a lot invested in this ride. Look at my furrows of worry in my big bank account. It just has to be real. But it's just a ride. And we kill all the good guys that tell us that. We let demons run amok. But don't worry. Don't be afraid. It's just a ride. We can change this ride anytime we want to. It's a simple choice of fear and love. The eyes of fear will tell you to buy bigger locks and get more guns. And the eyes of love will tell you that we're all one. If you want to truly change this ride, here's what we do. We take all that money that we spend in weapons and defense every year, and we spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would do many times over. And then we can truly explore space, both inner and outer, in peace.
Wow. I mean, I've never heard that quote, and I'm gonna have to look it up now. But I don't think of any better way to end a podcast that we've done here today. I don't know any other way to end that interview other than that quote right there.
That Bill Hicks, it's just a ride.
Wow. I guess I could say that's pretty insightful. That's something I'm definitely gonna have to go search up after this.
That's it. Look for that, and look for the big electron.
Yep, the big Electron. That's George Carlin, isn't it?
And Bill Hicks.
Right.
All right.
All right, I can do that. Well, you know what? Like I said, I don't know what else to say after that. So I guess, Izzy, I thank you. Thank you for coming on here and, chatting with us and just kind of giving us, what I can compare to just nuggets of wisdom. It's a little bit of a departure from what we usually do, but I think it's very useful, very helpful. And hopefully...
Well, nobody wanted to sit here and listen to me blow myself. And if you want to check me out on social media, look up Real Izzy High, all one word, on Facebook. And as I said, check out my recordings on YouTube, Izzy High's Pop Art 13. And hopefully we've turned some lights on, maybe. As I said, I'm not the electrician. I just try to turn the lights on.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. You guys heard it here. You know what to go do next. Go follow him on social media. Check him out. See what he's got to say. You already heard some of it. Go hear some more. And on top of that, you have some other, I guess you could say, materials to go look at. Some Bill Hicks and George Carlin. But thank you again, Izzy, for coming on here, giving us your time, giving us your peace of mind in this way, and just thank you for letting us pick your brain a little bit and get to know you a little better.
Hey, my pleasure. And guys, remember also there is a fight with the FBI and the Juggalos, and that is very, very real. Our rights are being taken away from us just because of the music that we choose and the family that we choose. So.
You've heard him here on the Dave Dynasty Show as a guest and as host of the monthly Graham's Gallery episodes. And now you can hear his stories. You can own a copy of Confessions of a Big-Time Wrestler, the audio book from Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., former multi-tag team champion in WWA and owner of Bruiser Bedlam. You can hear all of his encounters with the various wrestlers, places, and promotions he's worked as he tells about his colorful, long, and illustrious career. You can have your own copy for only $25, and that includes shipping and handling. It's very simple. Go on Facebook, look up Jerry Jaffe, Jaffe, send him a private message, and make arrangements to purchase a copy of Confessions of a Big-Time Wrestler now. You will not regret this purchase. And welcome back to the Dave Dynasty Show. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Thank you to Andy from the Road Home from Wrestling Podcast, a.k.a. Drewcifer Jones, for joining me as the guest co-host to open up this episode. Thank you to Akira for being our guest, as well as the American Kickboxer, a.k.a. Izzy High, the ever entertaining and controversial figure. Remember, you were warned about his comments. We like to give people a platform to express their views, express their opinions, tell their stories, and we do not judge, nor do we offer our insider opinions. We just let them express themselves. So this is, the opinions are not necessarily of us or the show, may not be those of yours, but we hope you can appreciate the tale and the journey and the story. But thank you for being on. Thank you for joining us and listening. Remember, visit DaveDynasty.com. All of our social media links can be found there. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. And wherever you find this podcast, make sure you rate and review us. If it's on iTunes, please give us a 5-star review, rating and review on there. It helps in the iTunes gods to get us found. Remember to visit our Pro Wrestling Tees store, buy a shirt, and support the show. We bring this to you free every week, and we hope you do enjoy it. But help us out. Help us keep it free. Help us keep us going. Buy a shirt, make a donation, patreon.com/The Dave Dynasty. You can make a reoccurring monthly contribution there, or you can go to PayPal.me/The Dave Dynasty, or just contact us, and we'll give you all that information up front. Make sure you follow us on all those social medias where we share lots of things, lots of clippings, articles, videos, different things, supporting the Midwest Express and Midwest Professional Wrestling. Speaking of Midwest Express, some of you might remember that once upon a time we did kind of a compilation web series, of lots of Midwest promotions and wrestlers and matches and things, really supporting the modern Midwest Professional Wrestling product, things that we can get behind and support. And we called that program the Midwest Express. We are coming out with our next episode of that very, very soon. It is put together. It is edited. The commentary is being worked on as we speak. So very, very soon you will see that episode out. So please make sure you share and support that when that is released. That's always a fun thing, great thing to see. Once again, thank you for joining us here on the Dave Dynasty Show. Thank you for all your support, everything you do. And until next week, this is the Dave Dynasty Show. I am Dave Dynasty. Be good, be safe, and keep on growing.